In a world where magic, kingdoms, kings, and queens exist, night had come. Bright stars were scattered all over the sky, and a large moon illuminated the land. The little girl with pink hair lay peacefully in her crib, coughing occasionally. She brought her fingers closer to her mouth to warm them with her breath, because they were completely red from the cold. The girl noticed that the luxurious bedroom with the large bed on which she had been trying to sleep all this time had become very cold, and she thought that at this rate she might even die. The heroine wondered what kind of room she was in and why it was so cold, and didn't even notice the cloud of darkness appearing nearby. Suddenly, Anissa heard someone's voice calling her, which made her get up from her bed and rub her eyes, because it was her friend who had arrived. In front of her, she saw a cute 8-year-old boy, Dietrich Lagrange, whom she called her brother. He asked the girl if she was awake. The little girl replied that she had not slept at all, and Dietrich asked why. During this, a dark entity approached the girl. Anissa, who was stroked on the head by something black, said that she did not just sleep, surprised that her brother already controls the shadow as if it were his own hands. The heroine asked the shadow to take his hand away from her, thinking that she knew that even if you are the strongest villain, being next to someone will change you. The reality this little girl lives in is the world of a novella she read in a past life called The War of the Roses of Those Men. The boy in front of her is the only heir of his line, having gotten rid of other candidates for power and having the right to take the place of the Duke. And also, before becoming a hero, he was sealed by the main character, Herman Euclid. This little boy in the novel is the villain. He, still with his cold gaze, asked his sister if they had come again. Anissa asked who he meant, thinking about how she felt bad about her little brother being sealed away. But she felt like he was holding up well. Pretending to be the epitome of innocence, the heroine thinks about how handsome her friend will be when he grows up. When Dietrich didn't get an answer from his sister, he asked her not to take his question to heart. Instead, he asked if her abilities had begun to manifest. She modestly replied that no, although in fact she, Anissa Lagrange, and this young man are brother and sister, born from the same mother, although the latter was not born with the ability to control shadows like her brother. The little girl reached out to Dietrich with her hand and began to plaintively ask him for forgiveness, because in fact she was not his sister. The main character was born into a clan that was not on the best terms with the Lagrange family, the Euclid family. Therefore, the person who will seal Dietrich is Herman Euclid, and she, the younger sister of the main character. The girl thinks that Herman also doesn't know about her, but she is the only one who was not born with the power of the sun in her family, which is under the protection of the sun. Anissa's mother, when she saw her newborn daughter, called the people who were saying that it was her child a lie, because it can't be so. When even her own mother abandoned her, she was kidnapped by the Lagrange clan, but the Euclid family, for whom the girl was an eyesore, did not look for her. This is how the little girl became the youngest daughter in the Lagrange family, and until she enters this terrible house, the only one she can trust is Dietrich. Here she is despised, so she clutches the only toy that is her consolation tighter, although she is glad that she was born an aristocrat. The girl understands that the Lagranges are not going to spend money on her because she does not have abilities, so she can only get along with Dietrich. Meanwhile, the boy threw some strange object onto his sister's bed and told her to take it. And when she asked what it was, he replied that it was a rattle. She immediately said that she didn't need it, offended by the fact that her brother still saw her as a child playing with rattles. But as soon as she took her friend's gift in her hand to say that she was old enough to play with it, suddenly a sharp blade like a sword appeared from the rattle, which greatly puzzled the little girl. While she was in shock that the knife was disguised as a toy, he calmly said that it goes into this mode when shaken. The Shadow Lord advises the little sister to simply shake the toy in case, like that time, a shadow gets through and someone tries to kill her. The girl asked again in bewilderment, and he repeated menacingly that in case of danger, she should simply shake a rattle in front of the offender's throat. Anissa was stunned by the fact that in her brother's eyes, she looked like a child who was capable of cutting another person's throat. The main character threw the gift away from herself and firmly said that she could not accept it. And the boy calmly asked why. She repeated that she couldn't. And Dietrich asked again in a frightening tone why. The girl was surprised that her brother was only 8, but he looked so frightening. In the end, the little girl lost her nerve and screamed that she couldn't do it because she was still a child. She started to cry because her brother could suggest that she, who can't even write, kill someone. In her mind, she calls him a crazy psycho. Anissa burst into tears because she thought that being born the youngest daughter in a family of dukes, above whom only the emperor, would have a sweet life. But no, The protagonist recalls that in her past life, she was an outcast in her own family. She was treated as a disgrace to the family because she was not as talented as her brother or sister. She thought that reincarnating as the Duke's daughter would be better than her previous life. But suddenly she realized that she had become Anissa from the world of the novel she had read. An ordinary girl turned into a 1-year-old child with red hair and pink eyes. Even though things turned out this way for her, she believes that her parents from her past life at least raised her properly. Lying in the small bed, the girl sighed, thinking about the place she had been reborn into. And the man standing next to her became curious about what was wrong with the child. Servant Lancel, who heard the baby's heavy sigh, has no idea what's wrong with her, and making a dissatisfied face, calls himself terribly unlucky. He wondered why he had to court the troubled princess, but the girl who understood him knew that he was doing it because he was new. Grabbing the crib tightly, the man irritably asked a certain Madame Camilla why she had died giving birth to such a mediocrity. Lancel is terribly annoyed by the fact that if this child's mother had survived, he would have been spared the miserable burden of changing baby diapers. The servant continued to loudly complain out loud that Madame Camille had given birth to this horrible child and died, and Anissa's ears were already starting to wilt from his screams. The woman Lancel served was one of the wives of the Grand Duke Lagrange. Camille was also the mother of the main villain who confronted Herman Euclid in the novella The War of the Roses of Those Men. The book said that she died giving birth to the protagonist, but in reality, the girl is not her daughter. In the past, when she was living a carefree life, Camilla held the newborn protagonist high and asked if she was the same child of Euclid. She was indeed the daughter of Euclid, the enemy of the House of Lagrange. But at that moment, the heroine was so enchanted by the beauty of the heroine that she could not think of anything else. Camilla appeared after giving birth and took Anissa away. She was then captured by enemy knights who intended to take everyone's life. One of the warriors, looking at the pregnant Mrs. Lagrange, asked what to do with the child, to which the other said that no one should ever know about it. The funniest thing, in the heroine's opinion, is that they didn't even try to save her, their heir, but ordered everyone to be killed, which scared her very much. However, the truth was that the Knights of Euclid were pursuing them with one goal in mind: to take her life. They did not hesitate to kill the pregnant Camilla. Seeing a newborn child with pink hair and eyes next to the murdered Duchess, the warrior, without hesitation, pointed his sword at him. The last thing Anissa saw was the sharp blade of a sword. She doesn't remember what happened to her after that, but she survived and was adopted by the Lagranges as Camille's daughter. Now, when the servant torments her by pulling her hands, she thinks that it is better than dying. But life in the new family was not much different from the previous one. The little girl started crying because the man was mocking her, calling her an ugly child. It hurt her when he grabbed her hand like that. The child was so frightened by the man's behavior that he burst into tears, and he irritably asked the girl why she was crying so much. Lancel angrily shouted at the newborn that he was the only one here who needed to cry. The subordinate shouted at the little girl that it would be better if she died, but she suddenly noticed an aura of black hatred that appeared on his chest, but with a blue center. The man burst into tears, sadly wondering why everything had happened this way and why his mistress had died. The protagonist noticed that a blue aura of sadness had appeared around him, meaning that he loved Camilla. It turns out that the main character does not have the abilities of the Sun Euclid, but she has the ability of energy. She understands the aura of people and is able to foresee the future. Suddenly, the servant stopped crying, wiped the tears from his face, and headed towards the exit of the room, which left the main character in a stupor. The girl started to act up, scream and twitch, because that servant left without even remembering that she needed to be fed. But then Anissa stopped crying and thought that Lancel really didn't want her to survive. And it was all because of Grand Duke Derek Lagrange. She thinks Dietrich is much better than him. There are more than 20 children registered in her foster family, Lagrange, and sometimes someone is left unattended. 2 boys were approaching the child's room, whose adoptive father, Derek, was an idiot who didn't care about them, only about those who were fit to be heirs. The father gives the children unusual psychological and mental tests because everyone needs outstanding skills. That is why Anissa is in some danger. Her danger, for example, lies in 2 boys who looked in through the open door and began to examine her. The little girl's eyes widened in shock when she heard from one of the boys that they just needed to deal with her. The taller boy told his friend to do it quickly while no one was around, and he, smiling menacingly, agreed. The girl began to get even more scared when she saw these guys had a yellow aura, which meant that they were amused by it, but it turns out that they were completely out of their minds. The little girl is becoming increasingly uneasy because she knows that eliminating competitors is one of the many tests in the Lagrange family, and being a weak and defenseless child in such a place is the most dangerous. The heroine burst into tears, mentally begging the boys not to do anything bad to her. She can't believe that she can do nothing but cry. Immediately after this, the crybaby noticed that the boys began to look at her with disgust, which made her think that her provocation had worked, and they would leave her. Suddenly, something happened that made the child quiet down. A stern, boyish voice was heard asking the boys what they were doing here. One of the hooligans asked Dietrich not to disturb them, and Anissa realized that they stopped not because they were touched by her sweet and desperate sobbing, but the suddenly appearing Shadow Lord did not fulfill the boys' request, but again, with frightening calmness, asked what they were doing here. The boys again asked him not to interfere in their affairs, and Anissa realized that the very same Dietrich who would become the most powerful villain in the future had appeared. She continued to make the plaintive sounds that babies usually make when they cry, but in reality, she really wanted to see Dietrich's face. The girl is very angry that because of her damn body, she cannot stand up, because her head is too heavy. Meanwhile, the hooligans began to tremble, because the young magician angrily told them that he had asked them about something else. The next moment, the little girl sighed in surprise because she saw an impressive picture above her. With the help of his magic, the boy lifted the bullies up, causing them to beg him to stop. And the heroine realized that this young man was incredibly strong. As the Shadow Lord came closer to his little adopted sister and looked at her, she was amazed at how handsome her savior was. She couldn't even take her eyes off him, thinking that, as expected, the greatest villain's face was simply shining with its magnificence. One of the robbers shouted a well-known fact to Dietrich. All newborns become victims of the heirs, so they do not need to be punished. He made a sly movement with his fingers, feigning surprise that he was here, and this impudent fellow still dared to justify himself to him. As soon as the boy clenched his fist, his shadow power squeezed the two villains very tightly in its embrace. One of them admitted his mistake and said that he knew that the little girl was his sister. Hearing one of the boys call the main character his sister, Dietrich loosened his hand and waved it to weaken his strength. At the behest of the talented wizard, the hooligans fell to the floor, and the magician himself asked if they thought that he stopped them only because the girl was his sister. He called his brother Galen's statement stupid, but the latter asked him irritably why he was doing it then. As Dietrich prepares to use his shadow magic again, he says that he only did so because there is a special condition in this game: to protect. Scary clots of shadow appeared around the two boys, causing them to say that they were very sorry and that they didn't know he was protecting her. The Shadow Ruler ordered the boys to get out of the room if they understood correctly. Galen said in fear that he understood everything perfectly, after which he rushed towards the exit, and his friend, not keeping up with him, asked him to wait. Anissa, who had been watching this performance the whole time, thought with admiration at how a 6-year-old child could be so charismatic. The protagonist was once again convinced that this villain was the one she had to stick close to in order to stay alive. In her mind, the girl enthusiastically decided that she was choosing him, and she needed him to be her protector until she ran away from here. But while she was thinking about her plans, Dietrich clenched his fist in his hand again, which left only a huge pool of blood from the two bullies, who did not even have time to escape from their brother. Anissa noticed that it had become very dark, which made her think that her brother had gotten rid of the boys, although she thought that he would let them go. The heroine thought about how merciless he was, when suddenly the Lord of Shadows directed his cold gaze at her, and she realized that he was coming towards her. The little girl strained her memory and remembered that in the original work it was Hermann who used his younger sister Anissa, and not Dietrich. With a gleam in her eyes, the child realized that this evil man, no matter what he was the only one she could trust. The baby decided to make Dietrich her protector so that she could survive, and he would only find out who she was when the war broke out. Then they would escape together. The main character started making cute sounds as if trying to say a word. She wants her brother to see her charm, but he only coldly asked the newborn what he was trying to tell him. Anissa is upset that none of her tricks are working. The boy told his sister that she was noisy, and the heroine noticed that since he entered the room, his aura had not changed, but remained the same gray. The little girl wanted to touch her brother's hand, but as soon as she succeeded, he immediately pulled his hand away and asked her what she was doing. Still smiling, Anissa was surprised that he wouldn't let her hold his hand. But if it had been another child, he would have burst into tears. But the girl decides that she will not behave this way. But on the contrary, she will make her protector feel the wonderful effect of touch. She nevertheless touched the young gentleman's palm. guided by the fact that a salesperson who barely touches a customer's hand when preparing a bill receives more tips. Dietrich asked coldly and calmly what the girl was trying to tell him if all she could do was make strange and incomprehensible sounds. The little girl continued to mumble, pointing her finger at the boy. She was trying to convey to him that she called him her brother. The Shadow Lord frowned, which surprised Anissa, considering he was only 6 years old. She thought he would start getting wrinkles on his forehead at this rate. The boy wanted to say something, but then the doors of the room opened wide, and the space began to fill with someone's frightening aura. It turns out that a well-dressed man with red hair burst into the room from whom a very frightening atmosphere emanated. The little girl began to tremble, feeling fear and bloody energy because she knows who it is. Derek Lagrange, who is the head of the house, appears. He menacingly asks Dietrich what he is doing there, and Dietrich replies that he was simply fulfilling a condition. The main character remembered that such auras as cruelty, bloodthirstiness, anger, and jealousy merge into one lump of dirt, like that of this frightening gentleman. Derek asked his son who the baby in the crib was, which made Anissa very angry, because this man was talking about her like an object. Dietrich, without changing his expression and remaining just as cool, replied that this was the daughter of Camille Lagrange. The protagonist thought that it seemed like she and her real mother had nothing in common. Suddenly, the owner of the house, raising an eyebrow in bewilderment, asked the heir who Camilla was. The little girl was very outraged by this, because it turns out that the Duke doesn't even know his own wife. Derek asked Dietrich if he meant the fighting slave he had bought at the slave market, and the child replied that he did. Then the man asked why he didn't see Camilla nearby, to which the boy replied that she died giving birth to a child. Suddenly, the head of the family pitifully declares that in that case he wasted the money with which he bought his wife. But then he remembered that his deceased wife had left him an heir, so he declared that he would regard this as payment for the money he had spent. These words of the gentleman so stunned the protagonist that she mentally called him a crazy psycho, because he says this in front of his son, who lost his mother. The man, meanwhile, calmly says that the first children of the Lagranges always died, and people like Dietrich quickly became candidates for succession. The owner of the clan advises the young man to die quickly and not be a parasite if he is not going to show him his skills. He, without showing any emotion on his face, humbly said that he would keep that in mind. Anissa was incredibly angry about this, but she couldn't do anything, so she just mentally told the man that he was talking complete nonsense. Mr. Derek began to leave, reminding his son to behave decently, and the girl, wanting to somehow take revenge on him, showed him an indecent gesture. While the girl was showing her father her middle finger and wondering what was wrong with him, Dietrich looked at her in bewilderment and said that it looked like her hands were broken. Suddenly, the young magician decided to put his palm on his sister's forehead and read a special spell. After that, he says that he can't seem to detect any abilities in the child, and the little girl guessed that her brother was using search magic to check whether she had abilities or not. The heroine knows that her abilities are not so weak that they can be easily detected, but she was surprised that this guy has been using magic for 6 years already. Here, the Lord of Shadows tells the little one something that makes her instantly become more serious. He assumes that she will soon die. But the girl, grabbing her protector by the hand and smiling happily, thought that this would not happen, because she would hide in his shadow and survive. After some time, when Dietrich left her room, Anissa thought that if she decided to survive thanks to him, she would do everything to look good. But the girl is incredibly unhappy with the fact that he hasn't shown up since they last met. Suddenly, she heard a voice approaching her door and immediately made a cute face because she thought it was her beloved brother coming to her. But the little one was upset when she saw a servant who came to feed her instead. She greeted him, calling him her food delivery man. But he, hearing that she mumbled something unintelligible to him, quickly shut her mouth with a bottle, complaining that she was too noisy. The baby became even more angry when it turned out that her formula was too cold, meaning that Lancel had not warmed her up or had frozen her. The girl quickly realized that this was not surprising, because Lagrange is a cold northern land and he is an idiot. However, she does not think that the servant did this on purpose. Meanwhile, the man is irritated by how stubbornly the child drinks the formula. He tells her that life is cruel after all, and Anissa guesses that he did not warm her up intentionally. After feeding the baby, the servant lifted him up so that the food would properly enter his stomach, and the heroine promised herself that she would fire him as soon as she gained power. But when she burped instead of vomiting, as happened once, she felt sorry for Lancel and decided in the future to give him 10 minutes after dismissal. The little one smiled again and called her uncle food delivery man. But in her mind, she promised herself that one day he would regret bullying her. Suddenly, the servant took the child by the arms to lift her up, saying that she was probably bored lying on the bed all day. Putting the little one down on the floor, the man says that since he is very busy, he needs to leave, so he will leave her here. Before leaving, the subordinate asks the child not to create a mess and to play quietly. The main character waved him goodbye sweetly, although she guesses that today is the very day when Lancel will leave her to play alone. Watching the doors that were about to close, the little girl admits that he had been careless about her. But her body is already ready for her to become a four-legged master who ran with all his might to the doors before they finally slammed shut. The girl's trick was to manage to put a toy between the doors so that they would not close and she could get out. The little prankster was very happy because she succeeded. Leaving the room into the corridor, Anissa decided that now she needed to find Dietrich, so she began to sniff to find his aura. But she suddenly stopped because she realized that she felt like a dog. Still, the protagonist understands that if she follows the scent of his aura, she will come to where he was locked away since childhood. The Garden of Withered Roses. Walking through a quiet flower garden, the little girl realizes that this scary place really suits the villain. Here, the detective found her protector, who was standing among the bushes with a shovel. She quickly crawled up to him and called out cheerfully. Suddenly, next to her brother, she saw another boy, whose entire body, except for his head, was buried in the ground. Anissa thought that he was being buried alive. A buried youth named Ulrich screamed at Dietrich to let him out, but he coldly reminded him that he had broken the rules of the game. Shocked by what was happening, the girl began to tug at her brother's clothes and call out to him to pay attention to her. When the boy finally asked her what she wanted, she mumbled something unintelligible, but in fact, she was interested in what he was doing. He, lifting his sister in his arms, asked her again because he did not understand anything, asking her to speak normally, like a human being. Anissa decided to show him her sweet and beautiful smile, but in reality, she is angry that Dietrich demands too much from her, although she cannot yet pronounce words properly. She made a cute face and tried to call him brother again, but it didn't work out very well. The Shadow Lord didn't react to the child's mischief in any way, but sighed heavily and continued to hold her in his arms. Here, the main character, slyly frowning, thought that since her protector was holding her in his arms, then she might have a chance for something. But then she was pulled out of her thoughts by Ulrich, who was buried in the ground and irritably asked Dietrich what he was staring at. The little girl was a little embarrassed because she had already forgotten that there was another person here besides them. However, having looked closely at the face of the buried man, she remembered from the novel that he was Dietrich's right hand, who for some reason was sticking out of the ground. This guy was the loyal assistant of the Shadow Lord in the story The War of the Roses of Those Men. On the orders of the master, he cut the throat of his Lord Derek, and he did not abandon Dietrich, whom the novel's protagonist Hermann later sealed. Ulrich is a loyal subject who left to save his friend. Anissa pointed at the future knight because she was curious about why he was in the ground, but he asked irritably why she was pointing at him. Dietrich told his little sister that she spoke like a chicken, and she was happy because she thought he was saying it because he thought she was cute. But then the boy asked her to get off him, and the girl was upset, because all her efforts spent on seeming nice were in vain. The heir threw the baby to the ground, telling her to crawl wherever she wanted. Suddenly, he turned around and announced that he was leaving, but the little one began to shout after him, mentally begging him to wait, and the buried Ulrich screamed for him to let him out of here. The buried man continued to call Dietrich, and the heroine quickly crawled after him, motivated by the fact that she should get another chance. She tried her best to catch up with him, but he was moving away so fast that she couldn't keep up with him, and because of this, she began to worry that she would lose him. Anissa knew that if she lost him now, she wouldn't know when she would see him again. Suddenly, she felt her hand step on something. Raising her palm, the girl saw that a piece of glass, which she had accidentally run into while crawling, was embedded in her skin. The pain brought tears to the little girl's eyes, and Dietrich, who heard plaintive sounds from behind, stopped. The unfortunate woman could not hold back and burst into tears, wondering in her mind how much pain she was in. The boy turned around and looked at her, and the protagonist was already offended at him for not coming, even if his sister was injured. The little girl noticed that a red aura appeared around her brother, and thought that he was angry because she was crying, although she herself thought that it was natural. Then she decided to shut up and not make any sounds because her crying irritated him, and if she cried again, they would kill her. But he, as always, with unfailing calmness, asked his sister why she had suddenly become silent. When Dietrich reached out to her with the words that if she was going to die anyway, it would be better to do it quickly, the heroine was already preparing for the worst. The girl had already closed her eyes because she realized that she had angered her brother, and her death was approaching. But instead, the Shadow Lord suddenly sat down next to the victim and examined her wounded hand, after which he carefully pulled out a glass shard from it. Then the boy gently brushed the tears from Anissa's eyes with his finger. She thought that, surprisingly, he was being gentle with her. Wiping the child's eyes, Dietrich, without taking his cold gaze off his sister, said that he considered her a strange child. The girl thought that even though he said she was strange, he himself was even stranger, because he buried people alive and did many other things. The young magician began to bandage the heroine's wound with a cloth he found nearby, and Anissa thought that he did not look like someone who would become a villain in the future. When the injured limb was already bandaged, the girl felt pain again, but realized that if she cried in front of Dietrich again, he might get angry again. She reached out her little hands to him and tried to call him brother, although she realized that in this state it would be difficult for her to return to her room. Suddenly, the boy, without saying a word, takes his sister into his arms. She thinks that she would not be surprised if he left her in such a state. However, looking at the cold expression on her protector's face, she realized that he was softer than she had imagined. Dietrich walked towards the palace, and the heroine was surprised in her thoughts that it was this child who would become a merciless and unshakable villain in the future. Already approaching the building that all children must call home, the protagonist thought that Mr. Lagrange was too harsh on his children. Once inside the palace, Anissa realized something else that she hadn't noticed for a long time. It was empty, as if no one had ever been there. The Shadow Lord approached the door and opened it, and the little one assumed that their castle had become like this after Camilla died. Dietrich entered the room, where he found a maid going about her business. She calmly asked the master what had happened, but when the boy said that he brought her a wounded child, the maid's face showed an expression of contempt and disgust. The woman, who frankly doesn't care about the health of someone else's child, asked what was wrong with that, which really shocked the main character. She wonders why the servants hate them so much. The maid defiantly asked the guy what she should do about it, and Anissa thought that if Dietrich killed her, he would be excluded from the candidates for the heir. Suddenly, the young gentleman, gently placing his hand on his sister's back, politely asks the maid to heal her. But the subordinate, who thought that he had hit the girl, asked why he had to attack the child and then ask him to cure her. While the little girl was in shock at how the girl allowed herself to talk to the Duke's son, the boy said that he did not harm his sister. When the young wizard told everything as it was, the maid grimaced, disgusted that now the boy was supposedly lying. Dietrich listens to the maid's words that since he is the son of a slave, everyone in the palace knows who he is, so he should not hide his true deceitful nature. The heroine's defender became even more angry when the servant asked why he was trying to hide his shame if he knew perfectly well what it was. The boy calmly says that the glass is stuck in Anissa's hand, and if the wound is not disinfected and lubricated with ointment, it may rot. But the maid, laughing, asked whether it mattered whether the wound rotted or not, if the girl was going to die sooner or later anyway. The little one started to cry because he wanted to live, and his subordinate added that there was no money in the Georgina Palace to buy medicine for them, and she didn't have any either. The main character noticed that her brother began to emit a red aura, which made her realize that he was truly furious. Dietrich, frowning, asked the girl if she thought he didn't know that she and Lancel were taking gold that should belong to the children. The girl, walking proudly past the young gentleman, asked him not to accuse other people without any evidence, and added that, after all, he should hide his vulgar character. The maid wanted to leave, but the shadow mage did not let her close the door behind her, thus stopping her. He asked her to give him the medicine, and he himself will cure the child. She said in fear that she had already said that she had no medicine or even money for it. And Anissa, watching them, noticed something strange. The girl realized that the maid was trying to escape quickly, closing the door with all her might. But Dietrich, who was holding her back with his hand, did not allow her to do so. A certain plan appeared in the little girl's head, so she quickly ran to her brother and, firmly grabbing his leg with her hands, began to pull him back. The door closed after all, and the young master still hadn't gotten what he wanted from the maid. In her mind, Anissa was glad that she had succeeded. Dietrich, frowning menacingly, asked his sister why she had stopped him, to which she thought that he would have been hurt if she had not pulled him away. Having heard only childish antics from the little girl in response, the boy asked her to forget about what he was asking her, since she still did not understand what he was talking about. The heroine continued to giggle sweetly, although she thinks her brother is feeling lonely. She feels like she should just smile, so she does. But this did not encourage her friend, but on the contrary. He told the girl that she looked like a fool. The protagonist began to scream in displeasure, trying to convey that she was not a fool, but he only sighed heavily, as if the whole world was about to collapse. The defender, taking his little sister in his arms, left the room, asking her to behave decently. The little girl looked at the boy with a puzzled expression. In her mind, she wondered where they were going. After a while, Dirich came into the empty room and put the child on the bed, after which he began to rummage through the nightstand that stood nearby. Anissa guessed that she was in his personal room. The young gentleman took out a bottle with some liquid, and the little girl was surprised at how dusty everything was, and his conditions were even worse than hers. Sitting down next to the baby with a bottle and a piece of cloth in his hands, the defender admitted that he had never treated anyone before. As he is about to bandage the unfortunate woman's wound, Dietrich asks her not to cry, even if it hurts, because he doesn't like it when people cry. In her mind, the heroine declared that he was asking the impossible, and that it would not be her fault if she cried again from pain. But nevertheless, she tried to hold on. When the Shadow Lord began to pour a special liquid onto the girl's wound, she immediately closed her eyes because she felt severe pain. She couldn't hold back and burst into tears. Anissa thinks that although these were tears that couldn't be held back, she was afraid that Dietrich's aura would turn red. However, to her surprise, he simply stared at her silently with his coal-black eyes. At that moment, although the girl did not see the sad blue color in her brother's aura, for some reason she felt a slight melancholy on his face. The next day, the protagonist wakes up in her room to the beautiful chirping of birds outside the window. Looking at her bandaged hand, she assumed that her protector had probably finished his treatment. Tiny thought he was very diligent. The little girl thought that whatever the liquid was, it didn't hurt as much as it had yesterday. But now she realized that the situation was worse than she thought. Dietrich is a candidate for succession, but his situation is no different from hers. He has no support in the person of Yurik, so all the children despise him. Anissa does not think that he receives financial support. Lancel and the maid's salary is definitely less than that of other palace servants, so they have no choice but to work and accumulate their discontent. Still, the little one believes that one cannot treat children so meanly because they are the future of the world. Then the butler Lancel entered the room, and the little girl was very happy about him and called him, as usual, the food delivery man. The man, noticing the child's bandaged hand, first asked what had happened to it, but then said that everything was fine until she died. The little one was angry that this was all he could say about her wound. She wanted him to take care of her, so she hinted to him to start feeding her sooner. Suddenly, a black aura began to emanate from the servant, and he himself wondered, why should he even care whether this baby was hungry or not? The little girl was very frightened by how suddenly Lancel's mood changed, and he began to scream hysterically that it was Anissa who killed Lady Camilla. The man began to mutter under his breath that if it were not for the birth of this girl, his mistress would be alive, and the heroine began to wave her arms intensely. She does this so that the evil servant's aura becomes white, because, as she remembers, this is how Anissa purified people's auras in the original novel. Very quickly, Lancel's energy began to dissipate, and he began to talk about the newborn child being innocent, and the girl realized that she had succeeded. The man began to feed the girl as if nothing had happened, and the protagonist remembered that she had to clean him every time he came to her. She was again unhappy that he had not warmed up the milk. He began to talk about how he had hoped that the situation in the palace would improve when Dietrich became a candidate for succession. But this did not happen. The subordinate suggested out loud that he should leave, because his salary here was very small, and the heroine was mentally delighted and ardently supported his decision. But when the food delivery man said that the young gentleman had not been fed for a long time, but he thought that he was still alive, the little one choked with anger. The man lifted the child to clear his throat and advised him to drink more slowly. But Anissa was shocked by what he had just said. Lancel muttered that he didn't think Jeannin cared about Dietrich, since there weren't even any breadcrumbs in the kitchen, and it was strange that the boy was still alive. The little girl began to scream indignantly because the butler seemed to think that only she needed to be fed, and the subordinate asked Her Highness to be quieter. The main character was shocked to discover that he had been starving a 6-year-old child, and the level of madness in this house was simply astounding. Suddenly, Lancel said that he was hungry, so he would leave the baby alone. And the girl was amazed that he was going to eat, knowing that the other child was not eating. The servant soon left the room, and Anissa, left alone, was surprised at the terrible house she had to live in. She realized that this upset her very much, and if the main character, Hermann, had grown up in such a house, he would have also become a villain. Suddenly, the girl, taking her bottle of milk with her, resolutely gets out of bed, because she has decided something. Once on the floor, she, like a superhero, sets herself the goal that she herself will take care of Dietrich's food. Determined to win, The protagonist put her bottle in her pocket and began to crawl, thinking that she needed to feed her brother as soon as possible. But before that, she noticed a mirror on the table and wondered if she should look at herself, and if she tried hard enough, she could reach it. As Anissa walked towards her destination, she remembered that the novel said she was beautiful, but Lancel called her an ugly child every day, so she thought she was not cute to Dietrich either. The child confidently reached for the mirror because now her body can walk and stand a little. She only had to reach the necessary thing with her hand a little bit. The girl succeeds in carrying out her plan. She picked up the mirror with her fingers and dropped it on the floor, which scared her a little. Finally, she brought it to her face to see herself reflected. The lady was very shocked by what she saw. To her surprise, the child she was reborn into was truly charming and cute. The little girl remembered the servant's words about how ugly she was. She mentally replied that he himself was ugly and had problems with his eyes, since he could not see her beauty. As she continued to stare into the mirror, the girl remembered a woman telling her that she was cursed. Anissa guessed that it was because of her red eyes. In the north, where the heroine lives, there are many people with red eyes, but in the south, people consider red eyes a sign of a curse. Because of this feature, the inhabitants are subject to exile in the south, especially the Euclids, who have bad relations with the Lagranges. But the little one realized that it didn't matter that her eyes were a cursed color, because she was very beautiful, cute and petite. Then she admitted that Dietrich was objectively prettier than her now, but she was still cute. And then the cutie realized that she had forgotten about Dietrich. After sipping some formula from her bottle, because she still has a long way to go and needs to recharge, the traveler is ready to go again. Meanwhile, the young master spent time in the garden of withered roses, sitting and thinking about something near the fountain. His sister approaches him with small steps, leaning against the fountain, and joyfully greets him, trying to pronounce the word, brother. He didn't answer her, and the girl started coughing from the amount of dust that rose. This made the heroine very angry, because it turns out that there is no service at all in this palace. Dietrich silently took the baby in his arms and sat her on the edge of the fountain next to him. The boy asked his sister why she came here, to which she only grimaced childishly. But in fact, Anissa thought that he cared about her. The young gentleman asked his sister what she was trying to tell him, to which she was pleased, since it seemed that he remembered that she called him brother. The Shadow Lord asked the girl in bewilderment why she was smiling so strangely, but she suddenly handed her protector a bottle of milk. The young magician asked what it was, and his sister simply answered, Mom, trying to convey with her thoughts that it was a baby bottle that she was giving him. Dietrich didn't want to take the gift, but she continued to insist, handing him the bottle, trying to pronounce different sounds. The boy asked her to speak normally, but she grabbed her friend by the sleeve and thought angrily that she also wanted to learn to speak. But so far she couldn't do it. By hinting to her brother to look at her carefully, Anissa showed by her example that she wanted him to take her bottle and drink milk. She again extended her gift to the young wizard, hoping that this time he would accept her sincerity. But he only sighed heavily. The heir asked the girl if she wanted him to drink it, to which she mentally replied that this was exactly what he should do to please her. But then the young gentleman says something that immediately makes the smile disappear from the baby's face. He says that he doesn't want to drink her formula. The heroine, who thought that he didn't want to drink because it wasn't tasty, didn't think of backing down. She leaned her hand on her brother's shoulder and continued to offer him something to drink, to which he sheepishly moved away. Anissa, holding the pacifier to her brother's mouth, hinted to him to open his mouth, pretending that it was an airplane flying towards him. But the Lord of Shadows, loudly repeating that he did not want to drink, threw the bottle away, causing it to roll on the ground. The little girl went into shock, and Dietrich, getting up from his seat, this time in a calm voice, told his sister that he had already said that he did not want to eat. The heroine began to silently climb down from the fountain, thinking that this stubborn child could at least pretend to drink her gift. She took her bottle back, angry that it had all turned out this way, even though she had worked so hard to get here. In fact, the girl started to cry because she felt so hurt. The child could barely hold back her voice so as not to burst into tears all over the street. The unfortunate woman decides that she will not cry, and thinks that it was not enough to simply give Dietrich a bottle for the baby to make him like her. Meanwhile, the young gentleman, after calling out to his sister several times, picked her up from the ground and asked her if she was crying. He, having placed the baby on the fountain, asks why she is crying, and whether it is because he did not drink milk. She is angry because it is obvious. It turns out that the girl is not crying because of this, although this also made her upset. She is sad because she suddenly felt unhappy. Suddenly, Dietrich, frowning as if resigned to everything, took the bottle from his sister. Then he unscrewed the lid from the container and drank all the milk to the last drop. Giving the heroine her drinking bowl back, the Shadow Lord asks if she is now satisfied, saying that he has drunk worse liquids than this. Anissa was so happy that her brother accepted her sincerity that she beamed with a smile, and now it seems that she had not been sad at all before. The main character, getting ready to pick up Dietrich again, wraps the bottle of milk in cloth. It has been a month since she brought the formula to her brother, but then the girl calls him ill-mannered because she is the only one who visits him every day, and he himself never comes first. The nurse realizes that she has seen Lancel's disgust many times when he came to feed her. He was irritated by the fact that the baby managed to drink so much expensive milk. But the protagonist, meanwhile, decides to bring her friend some cookies that her food delivery man left on the table. The girl deftly jumped up to get the box of sweets, but when the little girl wanted to reach it, she accidentally dropped it on the floor. Anissa quickly collected the surviving cookies in her pocket, convincing herself that only 3 seconds had passed since they fell, which meant that bacteria had not gotten onto them. Shaking her palms free of sweet crumbs, she determinedly prepared to begin her long journey. The traveler left her room and went down to the hallway and got on all fours. It is still difficult for her to move on 2 legs, so she will have to crawl. Suddenly, she heard approaching footsteps and, looking back, saw a certain boy in front of her. It turns out to be the same gentleman the little girl first met when he was buried in the ground. He asks if she is the same child. The baby didn't answer but just stared at the new man in bewilderment, wondering what Yurik was doing here, in the Georgina Palace. The boy, lifting the little girl in his arms, says that he allegedly heard that she is Dietrich's real younger sister. The heroine began to twitch so that they would let her go quickly. But Yurik, noticing the baby's pockets filled with cookies, asked where she was heading with this luggage, because it was strange that she was walking here alone. Anissa noticed that the boy's aura had turned red, making her realize that she had to be careful because he was not yet under Dietrich's control. Looking at the blonde, she swallowed nervously, and although his aura wasn't completely red, she felt some hostility. Unexpectedly, Yurik, continuing to walk along the corridor with the child in his arms, told the girl that he would take her hostage and threaten his competitor. The little one thought it was a great pity, and it seemed he didn't know Dietrich very well either. She was sure his threats wouldn't work if he used her. The nurse suddenly decided that it would be even more convenient for her if she walked to her brother like this, so she relaxed in the boy's arms and allowed him to carry her. Yurik was very surprised by the child's behavior. He asked her if she was afraid of him. She smiled and cooed, because she was through the main villain of the future and other children who tried to kill her, so she was not afraid of him at all. The young gentleman's face turned red. He sheepishly called the heroine a strange child. He continued walking, and Anissa got mad at him for not telling her she was cute. Then the girl thought that now they were on the same side and nothing would stop him from seeing her in a good light. The little girl decided to treat her new friend with cookies, but he was so surprised that he asked if she was giving him this sweet treat. The blush on Yurik's cheeks grew even brighter, and his aura turned a beautiful yellow. He took the treat, shyly thanking the little one. The little lady, noticing the pleasure with which he took the first bites of the sweet, was surprised at how much he wanted what the servants ate. But suddenly the blonde, freezing for a second, spat out everything he had managed to put in his mouth. The child was very surprised and frightened by this suddenness. Anissa began to make sounds of indignation, unhappy that he had spat out her cookies, which she had worked so hard to obtain. The young gentleman, examining the treat, assumed that it was poisoned, and the little girl thought that he was so ungrateful that he dared to suspect anything. Yurik accused the little girl of slipping him the poisoned cookies, otherwise she would not have offered them to him. As proof, the boy cited the fact that she was the younger sister of his enemy, and the heroine, rummaging in her pocket, thought about how he had once been deceived like that. To prove to the young man that the sweets were poison-free, the protagonist took out another cookie and boldly bit into it, causing him a storm of amazement. The heroine directed her determined gaze at her friend so that he would finally understand that there was nothing in these cookies. But he began to persuade the little one to spit out the cookie quickly, thinking that she would be poisoned. Anissa assumes that this guy does not trust people completely. Suddenly, the young gentleman heard that the girl had swallowed the sweet, after which he began to tell her that she should have spit it out, because this was the cookie that Dietrich had ordered her to give him so that he would die. She remembered that her brother had never given her such food, and Yurik suddenly suggested that his rival had planned such a turn of events. The next moment, something unimaginable happens. The boy turns the child upside down and forces him to spit out the poisoned food. But the tormentor suddenly freezes because Dietrich himself appeared nearby, put his hand on his shoulder, and asked what he was doing. The main character was happy to see her brother. The protector lowered her to the ground, after which she sighed with relief, because she thought she would die like that. The Shadow Lord repeated his question to the blonde, to which he excitedly said that his sister had swallowed poison. Dietrich, without taking his terrifying gaze off his competitor, asked him in a stern voice if he had fed her the poison. Eureka imagined this, and Anissa was surprised that a 6-year-old child could have such a pure, jet-black aura and cold, murderous determination. The young master asked the Shadow Lord not to look at him as if he were a coward like Brother Galen, and stated that he does not hunt babies. The young magician called his rival's words funny, and saying that if this was so, asked why he fed his sister poison. He started making excuses, saying that he ordered the child to poison him, and the girl ate the cookies by accident. Anissa, feeling that the atmosphere was already starting to get heated, decided to leave quickly. Dietrich claims that losers are a class apart, but tells the blonde that he seems no better than Galan's brother. Galan asks him again in a rage. The young master admits with a smile that there is no point in poisoning him, because even if he allows him to become a candidate, he will still be expelled. Urich's cheeks turned red like tomatoes from anger and shame. He calls Dietrich a fool, and he doesn't have to say whatever he wants. At this time, the main character, who was overtaken by the red aura of the blonde from which she cannot breathe, hurries to quickly distance herself from the boys. But she froze when the young master, having analyzed everything that the Shadow Lord had told him, asked why she had given him the cookies then. The little girl had to stop and look at the two bullies in bewilderment. Urich, as if not believing that this could really be the case, asked Anissa if she had given him the treat for free. She became embarrassed and, like all babies, made an incomprehensible sound, which actually meant, yes. Dietrich fell silent, and the blonde man sitting down next to the little girl asked why she gave him the cookies, if, as it turned out, they were not poisoned. The little one didn't say a word, but in fact she treated him because he was her brother's future subordinate, and because of that she wanted to be friendly with him. She remained silent because she thought that Urich would not understand her even if she tried to say something, so they just stared at each other. The girl, carefully getting to her feet, smiled and hugged her new friend, thinking that it would be nice if he could also love her at least a little, because for her it was not at all difficult. The protagonist is suddenly puzzled by the boy's sudden freeze. She notices that his aura has become almost green, although she doesn't know what it means. When Urich's energy completely turned green, he grabbed Dietrich's sister by the hand and said that he was very sorry. She didn't understand and asked again, to which the young gentleman repeated that he was apologizing to her, because he didn't know that she had given him the cookies for free. When the blonde said these important words, the heroine finally understood what the green color of a person's aura means: gratitude. Urich, having stroked the baby, once again asked her forgiveness for the fact that he had misunderstood everything. But for her it was nothing, because she had simply treated him. The boy confidently assumed that she had no cookies left, because their palace was poor, because miserable slaves lived there. This offended Anissa a little. He then apologized for spitting out her precious cookie due to a misunderstanding. She thought his apology was genuine. The little girl decided that she would forget the way he had turned her upside down and shaken her. She shook his hand and nodded, letting him know that she had forgiven him too. The girl wondered whether Urich's personality was like this from the beginning, since in the novel he was a minor character and did not appear often. Suddenly, her brother takes her in his arms and sternly asks his rival why he is in the so-called wretched palace of Georgina. The magician's sister became wary because she heard anger in his voice. Dietrich moved the little one, and finding herself on the floor again, she crawled on, assuming that her brother was angry because of Urich's disregard for the palace. He stamped his foot in irritation and said that he had come to challenge him again to a game in which he had failed to win last time. Anissa immediately guessed what kind of game it was that her new friend lost. She believes that the results were more than obvious. Meanwhile, Dietrich, smiling sarcastically, asked his competitor if he wanted to be buried alive again. The blonde's face turned red as the Shadow Lord chuckled and said that he seemed to have rather specific preferences. Urich began to insist that he had not died, and that meant it was a draw. And the heroine, peacefully watching what was happening, thought that this was what childish optimism looked like. He asks the young master to repeat their battle again, to which he coldly replies that, unlike him, a weakling, he has already eliminated 2 candidates. The Shadow Lord, deftly dodging his opponent's unexpected blow, calmly asked why he should waste his strength on him. The blonde ordered his opponent to shut up and to fight him rather if he had the courage. But before he could swing again, not only did he miss again, but he also didn't notice how the young master tripped him. The boy fell painfully to the floor, and Dietrich, calling him Euclid, asked not to disturb him. He was very angry that he was called that. He ordered his opponent not to talk nonsense and to call him as he should be called, Lagrange. But the young master indifferently declared that it made no difference to him whether he was Lagrange or Euclid, as long as he did not touch him. Suddenly, the blond man attacked his competitor with his fists and furiously told him not to look down on him. But before the attacker could even understand anything, he found himself in the air in an instant, due to the young master lifting him up with his shadow power. The main character was very surprised when she saw her brother using his shadow ability. Soon the prankster found himself on the floor in complete shock, but the shadow's huge hand was not about to let him go. Dietrich continued to taunt his rival by lifting him upside down with his magic, much to Anissa's shock. The protagonist hurried to her brother, thinking that she was almost sure that in the novel the boys had a good relationship, but now for some reason they were fighting. Fearing that the two might kill each other, she began to tug at her protector's clothes and try to persuade him to stop. He indifferently asked what she wanted, and the girl continued to make incomprehensible sounds, trying to convey to him that it would be problematic if he killed Yurik, because it would be more difficult for them to get rid of Derek. After thinking for a moment, the Shadow Lord let go of the unfortunate man, and he fell tiredly to the floor. The blond man clenched his teeth in anger, and Dietrich asked him if he knew that Derek Lagrange's mother was also a slave. The young gentleman then sternly threatened his rival that if he showed up in this palace again and started talking nonsense, he would remove him from his path. The young wizard had already started to leave, and Anissa, looking at Yurik, thought that he looked like he was about to cry. But suddenly she noticed that her protector was leaving as if nothing had happened. This puzzled and angered her a little. The baby crawled after him, screaming different sounds at him to stop because they had to follow their strategy, share milk and get closer. But her brother kept moving further and further away from her, and the girl, who did not understand anything, desperately reached out to him with her hand, wondering why he was leaving so quickly. The child wanted to stop Dietrich so much that she screamed "brother" at the top of her voice, and did so in such a way that she accidentally released air from her anus. The heroine was extremely embarrassed, but she thought that perhaps no one had heard it. So she tried to restrain herself so that it wouldn't happen again, but she didn't succeed, and Anissa farted again, drawing all the boys' attention to herself. Such a stone of shame fell on the little one that she bowed her head in horror, and in her soul she was ready to cry and fall into the ground forever. She, crossing her palms, began to beg God, if he still existed, to protect the dignity of this child into whom she had been reborn. Stinky heard her brother sigh heavily, and she felt even more ashamed that he apparently heard everything. Yurik asked his competitor what his sister was doing, while Dietrich asked the girl what she was doing there. She realized that it was driving her crazy. The little girl, embarrassedly covering her blushing face, began to hope that they would leave sooner, since the game was already over. But Dietrich came up to her and, taking her in his arms, asked her to get up and not lie on the floor. But Anissa, who had not yet recovered from her shame, mentally begged her brother to put her in her place and just leave. The Shadow Lord thought for a moment, then said that it was good that at least there was no smell, then offered to change his sister's diaper. The little one was so taken aback by this that she began to twitch, and the boy asked why she was struggling and whether it was because she didn't want him to do it. The young gentleman said that in that case she would stink. These words of his made the little one blush and get even angrier. In her mind, Anissa called Dietrich an ungrateful brother, because she even brought him milk. But in the meantime, he asked his sister what was on her shoulder. After taking a closer look at the girl's luggage, the young master realized that she had brought him milk again. He asked her if she wanted him to drink it. She cooed, which meant consent. Then the Shadow Lord asked if she had come to share some milk with him, to which she replied in the negative. The young master said that even if this was not so, she shared the cookies with Yurik. Turning to his sister, Dietrich, bowing his head sweetly, asked her if there were any cookies for him too. The little girl can't believe that this cold-blooded child is also upset with her. Despite this, she prepares to get the candy for him. Thinking that since the boy was looking at her so sweetly, she couldn't help but treat him, the girl was able to take out only the remaining sweet crumbs from her pocket. Anissa felt embarrassed again and continued to rummage through her luggage, thinking that she must have dropped all the cookies on her way here. Realizing that she no longer had any other choice, the main character held out the bottle of milk that she had left. Dietrich suddenly froze, not saying a word, and the girl began shaking the jar in front of his face, hinting to take it. She was shocked by how unstable her brother was. A minute ago, he was completely different. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. The bottle of milk opened and all the contents spilled onto the boy's head, and the container itself fell to the floor. The Shadow Lord, having laid his sister on the floor, began to wipe her wet face with his hand, and Anissa became convinced that because of her guilt, she would soon turn into a corpse. The little girl, trembling all over and covering her head, began to prepare for the worst and beg fate to allow her to be reborn into a normal family next time. But surprisingly, nothing happened to her. Looking at her brother, she saw that he was calmly wiping his face with a handkerchief and was not going to kill her. Looking at his sister, the boy began to say that he wanted to tell her something important. She nodded approvingly, letting him know that she was all ears. The girl was thinking about what it was that he wanted to tell her. Instead of a long conversation, the future villain told the little one that in those moments when she was at fault, she should apologize. She simply cooed, mentally glad that her brother wasn't going to kill her because of something like that. The young gentleman asked Anissa if she was going to apologize, which puzzled her, as she thought it was enough that she said, "Yeah." But very soon, Dietrich decided that she didn't have to apologize because she probably didn't do it on purpose. She nodded happily because it was much easier for her to pretend that she did it by accident. The boy, soaking wet, noticed Yurik, who was still standing and looking at them. He flinched when the Shadow Master asked why he was still there. The blonde turned around with displeasure and said that he was just about to leave them. The main character looked at him in bewilderment, and the boy had already rushed away from the future villain and his sister. The little girl looked at Yurik running away with bewilderment, but in fact, she was glad that nothing terrible had happened. She is pleased to realize that Dietrich's future right hand and Dietrich himself turned out to be not as scary as she imagined. Several months passed, and the palace in which the children lived was still in good health. The grown-up Anissa looks at her reflection, namely at her new baby teeth. She sighed as her stomach growled loudly, for she was very hungry. The girl does not know exactly how old she is, but her second spring with the Lagranges has come. Thanks to the fact that she had already learned to speak more or less, the little girl approached her servant Lancel and said that she wanted to eat. The man immediately handed her a bottle of milk, but she said that it was not food because she wanted to chew on something, since she was already 2 years old. The subordinate, calling the child a fool, said that it is still like food and moreover, it is very difficult to get. Lying down on the sofa, he says that he is very tired, so he is going to take a nap. Anissa drank the mixture anyway, but was unhappy with the fact that she had already told the servant many times that she was not getting enough of it, but he seemed not to care. The girl became even more angry when she realized that Lancel had fallen asleep so quickly because he had eaten too much. He did not wake up even when he was hit on the forehead. Leaving the empty bottle on the servant's head, the heroine decided that she no longer had a choice but to go to the kitchen herself today. As soon as she found herself at the threshold of the kitchen, she looked around carefully, thanks to which she realized that there was no one in the room. Because of the delicious smell that she smelled, the little girl found the candies that Lancel had left in the closet so that she could eat them herself. Opening a jar of sweets, she thinks that adults are very petty, because she will be able to eat them before the servant arrives. The hungry girl was already preparing to eat her first chocolate bar, but she was unable to do so because a stranger appeared nearby. It was the maid, Janine. With obvious irritation on her face, she asked the young mistress what she was doing here. Seeing that the little girl was doing something that, in her opinion, she was not supposed to, the girl asked with displeasure what she was eating. The maid claimed that she was eating her candies, and Anissa realized that, in fact, these candies were not Lancel's. Janine began to take the jar of candies from the child, ordering her not to eat other people's food. But the heroine, not intending to give up the chocolates, shouted that she hadn't even eaten them. But she thought she was lying. Holding the jar with all her might, Anissa continued to desperately prove that she hadn't even managed to try one thing. But the maid insisted on her own. Pulling out her candy, she asked the child to stop lying and give her her food. Suddenly, the jar is torn from the girl's hands and falls to the floor, causing some of the candies to scatter underfoot. The maid was terribly angry that her favorite sweets were now crushed. The girl bit her finger and thought that the maid just needed to give her a little food, because she was going to eat even less than what had spilled on the floor. While her subordinate was busy cleaning up the fallen sweets, Anissa realized that she was very hungry when she licked the chocolate crumbs that remained on her fingers. She reached for the sweets again, hoping to take at least one to somehow satisfy her hunger. But Janine suddenly pulled the girl's hand away painfully, saying that she had already said that these weren't her candies. The little girl stroked her hand, which was reddened from pain. She felt so sad that tears rolled down her cheeks. The girl sternly asked the child what Lancel was teaching her, after which she irritably asked the unfortunate woman why she was crying. Anissa burst into tears because she felt even worse. She doesn't understand how anyone can be so heartless towards her when no one in the palace even feeds her properly. Janine began to pinch the crybaby's cheek painfully, telling her that she shouldn't cry, because she herself was a thief, which really irritated her. Continuing to squeeze the young lady's skin tightly, the servant says that if she does something bad, she will be punished. But the girl continues to make excuses. Finally, the maid let the poor baby go and asked if Lancel wasn't feeding her. The heroine said that the servant only fed her milk, but Janine said that she didn't care, and it looked like she would have to lock the kitchen door. The maid had already started to leave, but when the little girl grabbed her by the dress, asking her to wait, she looked at her with disgust and asked what was the matter. She, slightly hesitantly, admitted that she was very hungry, but the girl asked her to speak correctly, after which Anissa repeated her words. The maid, pulling her dress away from the girl, said that she didn't care, advising Anissa to eat wild animals in the forest, as the young master did. The subordinate quickly left, loudly slamming the door behind her, and the main character was left sitting on the floor, sobbing from hopelessness. Walking in the garden of withered roses and wiping away her tears, the girl thinks that there is nothing to worry about, because it is spring now. There should be some berries around. But when she came to the bushes, on which it would seem there should be at least some fruits, she discovered that there was nothing edible around at all. As the protagonist continued walking, she thought that it was spring, but unfortunately, not a single flower had bloomed yet, let alone fruit, and it was a bit chilly, and this was the villain's favorite place. Anissa realized that she couldn't believe that children lived in such a gloomy place, and that Dietrich, even with his abilities, couldn't eat properly. Suddenly, the girl came to the fountain, where she found her brother, who had just roasted something tasty over the fire. Sitting closer, the little girl greeted him and said that she missed him very much, but the young gentleman asked who said that she could sit wherever she wanted. The boy asked her to forget about what he had just said, and the little girl noticed that he had gained a little weight, which meant that bringing him milk was worth it. At this time, the Lord of Shadows was roasting a small quail on the fire, which turned out very appetizing and golden. The hungry heroine looked at this dish with burning eyes, and the young master asked her why she was drooling so disgustingly. The poor thing immediately wiped her lips and apologized for looking disgusting. But Dietrich said that he had not called her disgusting in particular. Assuming that his sister was very hungry, the talented magician handed her the prepared food, offering her a snack. The girl, despite her strong desire, waved her hands and said that she would not eat it because it was food that he had originally prepared for himself. But he took her refusal too lightly, which is why he immediately began to eat the fried meat himself. The orphan was very surprised by this, because in fact she wanted to eat. She realized that he did not ask twice. Anissa, asking her brother if he liked it, thought she just needed to say yes. He said that it was very tasty, and the girl pouted at this, sarcastically thinking that she was very happy for him. The little one realized that her brother was not going to leave her anything, but she was completely convinced of this when she saw that he had completely eaten all the meat. The young gentleman, noticing a strange redness on the girl's face, asked what had happened to her face, to which she muttered that she had been pinched. Dietrich asked who did it, and Anissa replied that it was Janine. The heroine thought that her protector was the only one who treated her normally. The young wizard asked if she meant his maid, to which the girl replied that she did. The boy asked why she had pinched her like that. The little girl admitted that she was scolded for trying to eat the chocolates that belonged to the servant, but they all fell on the floor. She thought that, no matter how you look at it, pinching the child's cheek so painfully was too cruel, and the Shadow Lord responded to her words with a simple, "I understand." Dietrich suddenly stood up from his seat, and the main character asked where he was going. Looking at his sister and thinking that her hair looked like cotton candy, he replied that he was going to the palace, whereupon she declared that she would go with him. But the young magician said it would be better if she stayed here. The boy promises his sister that he will return, so he says that she just needs to wait for him. The little girl agreed with him, and the Shadow Wizard himself headed towards the palace. After a short time, the Shadow Lord came into a cold, shabby corridor and stopped there in front of one of the doors. A terrifying coal-black aura appeared around the future villain, and he himself, before entering, drew conclusions, because he was told that she cannot be killed. Suddenly, Dietrich bursts into the maid's room, not just entering, but knocking down the door with his shadow power, causing the girl to scream loudly. Seeing the young gentleman with no emotion on his face amidst the rising smoke and dust, Janine wanted to ask him what was going on, but she didn't succeed, because the hand of the shadow grabbed her by the throat. The heir says that he doesn't care if she and Lancel fill their pockets with money. The boy also added that he doesn't care whether she looks down on him or not. He claims that her behavior is not worth a single second of his time, but Dietrich said that starving that little girl was a different story. The Shadow Lord admits that this girl, although sometimes very annoying, he would never want her to die of hunger. At this time, Anissa, barely holding back her tears, mentally calls her brother a complete idiot because several hours have already passed and he still hasn't returned. Trembling all over, she remembers that Dietrich asked her to wait near the fountain until the end, even though she would freeze to death before she died of hunger. Unable to sit still and freeze any longer, the little girl stood up, deciding that she would also go to the palace and that her protector was a complete traitor. Hurrying home, the girl became even sadder because she was very cold and very hungry. Some time passes, and the servant Lancel surprisingly, joyfully presents his little mistress with the food she wanted so much. She was very happy and took the bun with pleasure. She was happy that they finally brought her something to chew, wondering what had suddenly come over his servant that he had become so kind. Lance also asked the lady to drink some milk, although just a couple of days ago he complained about the difficulty of getting milk. After tasting the bread, the heroine started crying because of how delicious it was. Now she understands Yurik, who was so happy with a simple cookie. Since Anissa now has bread, she can give more milk to Dietrich, for which she ran to his bedroom, but he immediately said that he did not want it. The little girl began to rummage in her pocket, thinking that her brother was still an individual who was very difficult to please. She took a bag of cookies out of her pocket and offered them to her friend. The girl thinks that even though he is lazy, she will give them to him. The boy asked his sister where she got them, to which she, with great pride which made her glow, said that she stole them. The young magician, taking the bottle from the child, told her to eat her cookies herself, and he would only drink milk. He quickly drank the entire contents of the jar, and the main character was happy that this time he drank the mixture well. The little lady felt very proud that she was feeding and thus raising her friend. But when she thought that when her brother grew up, he would become a successful villain, this thought suddenly confused and frightened her. The girl swallowed anxiously, hoping that everything would be fine if he did become that antagonist. Looking at Dietrich, who has already finished his milk, she thinks that even if he becomes a villain, he will probably treat her better. While taking her bottle, the baby also reflects on the fact that if everything does not turn out as she expects, then all the efforts she has put in have been wasted. Having treated her brother to milk as she wanted, Anissa had already said goodbye to him and wanted to leave, but suddenly she heard the Lord of Shadows modestly call out to her. She turned around in bewilderment, wondering why Dietrich had called her not by name, but simply, "Hey!" The boy asked his sister to come closer to him, and she became even more indignant because it seemed he didn't even know her name. Running back to her protector, the protagonist says that her name is actually Anissa, but for some reason he doesn't immediately understand what she means. When he asked what Anissa meant, the little girl frowned in irritation and anger. She cried out in an offended tone that it was her name. But at that moment, Dietrich suddenly extended his hand to her, where he had hidden some object in his palm. When he opened it, the heroine saw a beautiful, juicy, ripe cherry. The young gentleman asked his sister if she could eat something like that. Taking the berry in her hands, the little one said that she could chew it, after which she thanked her friend, thinking that it seemed like he already liked her. She called her brother the best man in the world, to which he readily agreed, after which she thanked him again for the treat. The girl happily gobbled up the cherry, but suddenly thought better of it when Dietrich said that it really did look like a chicken. She was struck by the fact that he compared her to this animal. But the young wizard, meanwhile, asked his sister whether he should give her everything he had. She, of course, agreed, after which the boy began to rummage through his pockets. The future villain handed his friend a few more berries, and Anissa wondered if he said she looked like a chicken, it meant he thought she was pretty. The little girl's eyes filled with tears because the sweet and sour taste of the cherry was the best thing she had ever eaten. And Dietrich, noticing this, asked why she was crying. She said that she was not crying, remembering that she had previously only had rye bread and milk, and she could only dream of such delicious berries. Suddenly, the young lady noticed that her brother was looking closely at her face to see if she was crying or not. The girl, beaming with joy, said that she really wasn't crying, and the cherries he treated her to were very tasty. Then the boy asked if all children were like her. Anissa didn't understand what he was talking about, so she thought he was saying that cute kids like her were rare. Looking at the thoughtful face of the heir, she already thought that he was really attracted by her cuteness. Suddenly, the boy said that he could not answer this question, since all the children except her were dead. The heroine was shocked that he spoke about this. The lady tried to jump onto her brother's bed with a smile, pretending that she hadn't just heard anything disgusting, but she couldn't jump on the bed right away, because it was too tall for her height. The poor thing was left hanging on the edge, ready to fall. Everything turned out well for her when Dietrich grabbed her by the clothes and sat her down on the bed himself. The little girl felt very grateful to him for this, and supposed that he was now kind to her in his own way. She happily huddled closer to her protector. It's called the mere exposure effect, where people are naturally drawn to others they encounter frequently. The heroine is proud that when Lancel wasn't looking after her, she came to her brother and was close to him, which is what created the Velcro effect. The child had already begun to think that the moment had come when she could admit that all her efforts had not been in vain. But the boy suddenly moved away from her in irritation. Without thinking of retreating, the protagonist grabbed Dietrich into her arms, smilingly thanking him for his hospitality, but he only asked her to leave quickly. As usual, not pronouncing some letters in the words, she thanked him again, especially for the cherries, and admitted that she liked him. While Anissa couldn't believe that the future villain was picking berries especially for her, the Shadow Lord once again asked her to leave him alone. He wanted to push his sister away with his hand, but she hugged her, thinking that it was nicer to see a bad child doing a good deed rather than an initially good one. The little one began to repeat how much she liked her brother, but he indifferently said that he didn't care about it. Anissa thought he couldn't be that cold or his bones would freeze, but she still looked in the mirror and was amazed at how cute he was. While the young lady was wondering why he didn't think she was cute and whether it was because they weren't alike, Dietrich asked if she wanted some more cherries. She cheerfully agreed, thinking that if the heir was now offering her food like this, then this was already a big step forward. While his sister was gobbling up the berries, laughing cheerfully, the boy said that she had a good appetite. Suddenly, her brother's words made the heroine shudder. He says that he took these cherries from another palace and they, it seems, are not poisoned. The little girl, in complete shock from what her brother had told her, asked him in fear if he had given her poisoned food. He said with surprising calm that he didn't know. And Anissa thought what a vile person he was. She was so stupefied that she just silently shook her whole body, amazed at what an ungrateful wretch this boy was. She wanted him to give her back all the milk she brought him. The lady recalls that among the Lagrange heirs there is only one rule: do not kill servants, which means that the methods of killing competitors can be openly revealed. Looking fearfully at the cherries, she realizes that breaking into another palace and poisoning the food is a common occurrence. It happens about 3 to 4 times a week. The protagonist closed her eyes because she thought that the food was really poisoned and she would soon die. But suddenly she heard her brother chuckling. This made her very angry because he dares to laugh even when she thinks that he is about to die. Smiling slightly, Dietrich reassured his sister that everything was fine because the kill the brothers game was over, and all the candidates knew that he would not die from the poison. The main character was embarrassed that he was talking about this, laughing as if it was a complete trifle. Through the novel, Anissa remembered that the reason her brother was resistant to poison was because his mother, Camilla, poisoned him every day. She also recalls that it was such a strange family tradition that she felt sick just reading about it in a book. Suddenly, a maid came into the room, whom the girl simply called Mevin. The girl was surprised to find the young mistress here again. The little one happily threw herself into the maid's arms because she had come to play with her, and Mevin said that if she ran like that, she would fall and get hurt. The worker asked the lady how she could be so beautiful, to which she replied that she also liked her nanny. They talked about whether the child had come here on her own, and Anissa said that she had. The maid complained about Lancel, who was doing something incomprehensible at that moment, and Dietrich was quietly watching them. Hugging her beloved maid, the girl glanced at her brother, and for some reason it seemed to her that she felt his cold gaze. But when he turned away, she thought she must have imagined it, because his aura remained the same as always, calm and gray. Mevin offered to take the young lady to her room, to which she agreed. In fact, this girl's name is Marilyn. The heroine just can't pronounce her name properly. She is the first adult Anissa has become attached to. Waving goodbye to the heir, she cannot believe that such a good servant as Mevin has come to replace Janine, who disappeared in an instant. Although the little girl said goodbye to her brother, he did not react. The maid laughed and told the young master that she would take the lady and return. The heroine mentally called Dietrich a fool, joking that she didn't care about him because she had a loving servant with whom she left his room. Some time passes. The cheerful main character runs up to the Shadow Lord, who was spending his time by the fountain as usual, and calls out to him. But the girl suddenly froze because her brother began to correct the way she pronounced his name. She repeated his name the way she usually pronounces it, but he told her to say it correctly each time. The lady doesn't understand what came over him. No matter how wrong Anissa pronounced the words, she still decided to tell her friend what was worrying her so much. Her beloved Mevin had gone somewhere. The heroine asked where her servant had gone, but the boy asked which one, and she, poorly pronouncing the words, said that she meant his subordinate. but then realized that he was teasing her on purpose. The girl said that she missed this maid very much. She realizes that Dietrich and Marilyn are the only ones who communicate with her in this palace. The protagonist is pleased that her beloved nanny considers her beautiful, unlike her brother, although she is also consoled by the fact that at least he does not ignore her like before. The Shadow Lord never looks for his sister, as a maid does, to read her fairy tales, play with dolls, or tell her some story. The little girl decided that she needed to explore this world. For example, learn more about other families or about the legend of the Shadow Devil, because she was very curious about it. The young magician asked the little one not to cry because of this, but she said that she doesn't cry anyway. She thinks that her brother thinks she's a crybaby. Dietrich asked why she liked the maid so much, to which the little one replied that she read books to her and told her stories. The boy thought about something, after which he said that she seemed to be missing toys. The heroine thought that she actually didn't mean that, but the Shadow Lord had already begun to summon someone with his magic. The child was very surprised when he saw a huge halo appear on the ground, which foreshadowed the appearance of something otherworldly. A large, black, arched demon appeared from the portal and asked the young gentleman if he had summoned him. The boy said yes, and the girl guessed that Baal was the demon king from the novel. The entity asked its master why he had summoned it, to which the master ordered it to play with its sister. The demon did not immediately understand what was being discussed. Dietrich repeated his order, and Anissa was amazed that he was asking the demon king himself to play with her, while the latter was also nervous in front of him. The spirit asked if he wanted him to relieve the young lady of boredom, to which he said yes. The girl was even more shocked because she did not want this. The evil spirit said that it understood its task, after which it approached the child, but the baby was very scared of this because the demon emanated an aura of death. But suddenly a black rattle appeared in the spirit's hand and he asked if he should shake it. Without waiting for an answer, the demon began to dance with the rattles, but the protagonist thought that, although he asked, he began to shake the toy at his own will. Anissa is torn between two feelings. She is scared, and at the same time, for some reason, she likes the rhythm that her juggler produces. She tried her best not to show everyone her admiration, but she failed because a laugh burst out of her, and Dietrich smiled contentedly. A few hours later, the main character is shocked by what Lancel told her. The girl furiously asks why her favorite servant Mevin was fired, to which the man says he knows nothing more. Since Anissa was born, this girl was the first adult who treated her well. Lance asks why she is so worried, since she is only a maid, but she angrily calls him an idiot. The subordinate was stunned by the petty heiress calling him an idiot. He asked the young lady to repeat what she had just said. The heroine, not hiding her raging anger, shouted that he was a complete idiot and a blockhead. He took a deep breath and asked what he should do about it now, since he was such a fool that he forgot to order food for her ladyship today. He told the girl with a disgusting smile that she apparently had no choice but to starve today. But before the poor little girl could even say anything, the food delivery man immediately closed the doors behind him, leaving the child to his own devices. Anissa was so stunned that she couldn't find the words to say anything. She wondered why the hell this scoundrel hadn't been kicked out of the palace yet. She was angry with Derek because instead of firing Lancel, who teases the child and starves him, he kicked out kind Maven. Deciding that she urgently needed to tell her brother this, she knocked on his room door, even though he had once asked her not to bother him with trifles. Deciding that he would not open the door even if she knocked, the girl herself burst in on him, joyfully shouting his name. But then she immediately felt a breath of wind coming from the open windows. The heroine decided that opening the windows was stupid because the house was not heated. Bent over from the cold, the heroine called out to the air once more, wondering where he could have gone, leaving all the windows open. But suddenly she heard her brother's strange, heavy breathing, thanks to which she realized that he was there but was not answering her. The girl found her friend on the bed, who was clearly not feeling well. He had a high temperature and was having difficulty breathing. The young lady suggested that he was probably ill and that even the blanket was not keeping him warm enough. The young magician was surprised to see his sister, who said that his blanket must be thick. The boy angrily ordered her to get lost, but she, hiding her displeasure, said that he was so nice to her. The Shadow Lord asked her to remove the blanket, but she refused to do so because his room was cold. Anissa asked if he had any medicine. The sick man asked the heroine to take the blanket off him and leave, but the little one said that she did not want to leave him because she was worried that he was sick. The Shadow Lord repeated that he wanted her to get lost, and she had already said that she would leave, but only after she brought him water. She, noticing the basin of water, breathed a sigh of relief, but she was puzzled by the fact that the servants brought water for washing and left the sick child alone. Wetting a piece of cloth in water, she thought how inhumane the servants were. They left him even though a cold is a terrible disease for children. The girl placed a wet towel on Dietrich's hot forehead, but he became angry that it was too wet, for which the little one apologized. The young wizard threw the rag away, shouting in displeasure that he had already asked her several times to stop doing this. But Anissa unexpectedly thanked him for squeezing out the excess water in this way, and then placed the towel back on his forehead. After some time, when the girl had covered her brother's bed with warm pillows and lay down next to him, the talented magician asked if she was going to leave. The girl, laughing, replied that he was cold and he would warm up when she hugged him, because when it was cold, all you needed was to hug someone. The young lady crossed her arms and said that he should hug himself if he didn't have someone to hug. Suddenly, Dietrich, getting up from the bed, pushed his sister out of bed, telling her to get lost. He carefully sat her down on a chair, saying that she was so noisy that it gave him a headache. The sick man left, and the main character thought that he was really feeling very bad, so she said that she would not make any more noise. After a while, Anissa knocked on the Shadow Lord's room again, and was surprised that she couldn't enter because the door was closed. In fact, the boy had locked it so that she wouldn't enter again. When he opened the door and looked at his sister, he saw her on the floor with a pile of branches. She smiled happily and asked if he was asleep. The patient recalled that he seemed to ask her to be quiet, but the little girl stated that she did not make a sound. Then the gentleman asked her why she had brought this trash from the street, but she said that it was firewood that she had collected for him. Looking at his sister's smile, Dietrich thought that she might be stupid, but he had some doubts about that. He nevertheless let the girl into his room, resigned, tells her to do what she wants. The heir thinks that he is being stupid because of the rising fever. Very quickly, the dark night came and the brother and sister slept peacefully on the bed. But it seemed that they were not destined to sleep peacefully today, because someone's frightening silhouette suddenly appeared in the window. An unknown person who was about to get to the children through the window threw a sharp knife towards Dietrich, but he immediately stopped him with the help of a shadow. The attacker, equipped with high-class uniform and equipment, was scared like a coward as soon as he saw the power of the future villain's shadow. The demon lord then caused the stranger to die instantly with his black magic alone, and his blood splattered everywhere. The boy was slightly shocked that they didn't even let him sleep peacefully, and the heroine was sleeping so soundly that she didn't even wake up and didn't suspect that a guest had just arrived. Looking at his sleeping friend, he thinks how stupid she is, because she spent the whole day looking for Mevin, who, in fact, was sent to kill her. The young wizard cannot understand this girl at all. Why she likes the maid more than the demon Baal, who is superior to her in everything, and why she likes to sleep here. He wondered if it was because she was untalented, or because she was trying to survive under his protection. The mage was sure that no one could have told her to do that. Remembering his girlfriend's face, the young gentleman thinks that he always thought that she knew about his situation. The master thought that although this irritated him, he was protecting this child not only because of his blood ties. Another reason why he is protecting her is that there is another rule for the future heir: to sacrifice something important. Asmodeus, a demon who protects the family, wanted Duke Lagrange to be like a demon, someone who only cared about his own powers. Some, like Mr. Derek, sacrifice their lovers, friends, or even family members to the demons they have tamed in order to be recognized by Asmodeus. For his goal, Dietrich must cast aside his humanity. But suddenly he thought about what would happen if he had nothing important to sacrifice. A shadow appeared from the floor and told the owner that if he did that, he would end up like Spring Lagrange. The entity informs that this man was much more suitable than Derek, but he could not pass the test because he had nothing to sacrifice. Baal subtly hints to the boy that his sister has arrived at a very opportune time and advises him to cherish her. Dietrich asked the demon if he really thought they could deceive Mr. Lagrange in this way, to which he replied that he could. Shadow said that they would be able to deceive not only Derek, but also Asmodeus, who evaluates candidates, because people tend to value their family, and they will accept this unconditionally. But suddenly, Baal added that there was one thing that interested the young gentleman very much. The entity tells the owner that he should not keep his sister too close to him. The young Shadow Lord smirked and asked his subordinate if he was joking, since her safety was no more important to him than his own. Baal looked at the sweetly sleeping main character and called her an unhappy princess. Gently stroking his sister with his hand, the boy says that he planned from the very beginning to use her as a sacrifice in order to become the heir. Suddenly, he felt a strange pain in his heart. Having felt it, he already thought that he had been poisoned, but he had not noticed. Continuing to stroke the baby's head, the young wizard thought that he should be careful. Sometime later, on a carefree day, the demon hands the joyful Anissa her bottle of milk, calling her his princess. She was very happy because this time Dietrich's employee made her strawberry-flavored milk. The lady was amazed that the demon only had to shake the bottle for the flavor to change, and the next flavor had to be chocolate. The little one thinks that Baal is not a bad nanny, even though he has an ominous aura. The evil spirit asked the girl if she liked it, to which she replied that she liked it very much. But then she asked why he called her a princess. The entity replied that she was the true princess. After all, she was His Majesty's younger sister. Anissa asked if he was the king. He replied that Dietrich was the demon king, subordinate to the supreme ruler. He was chosen by him, and thus he was the king, and she was the princess. The main character, mentally surprised that the demon king chose her brother, who was barely 7 years old, says that he apparently likes Dietrich. Baal, smiling sarcastically and picking up several books with his power, said that it was not that he liked this boy very much. The girl, who was lifted up by the magical power of the evil spirits, asked what was the matter then. Placing the child on his lap, the demon tells the little girl that he heard that Maven often read to her, and his master ordered him to do so as well. The protagonist wondered what she was sitting on. At first, she thought it was her knee, but then she assumed it was her thigh, because it was very soft and comfortable. Anissa began to touch the demon's body, thinking it was like marshmallow, but Baal asked her not to. The little lady asked why. When the evil spirit said that these were his genitals, she immediately removed her hand and apologized. It turns out that demons have genitals and can have children. The demon told the child that nothing terrible had happened, then asked which book he should start with. And the lady thought that perhaps because she herself was inside the book, she knew all the fairy tales that existed. Eventually, the little girl pointed to a book called The Little Rabbit in the Moon, and Baal supported her choice, saying that he liked it too. But as soon as the princess took the fairy tale into her hands, the shadow suddenly began to evaporate, preparing to leave the bewildered girl to herself. The demon explained to the lady that if he was seen in this form, his reputation would be shaken, after which he wished to see her later. Anissa thought that she had not even heard any footsteps, and he had already disappeared. Suddenly, the little one heard her favorite servant calling her. The main character jumped up when she realized it was Marilyn. She wondered why she came back if she knew she had been fired. The door to the room was opened by a maid who, in a voice unfamiliar to her, told the child that they had not seen each other for a long time. Maven, whose aura has changed to a frightening blood red, says that after Dietrich fired her, she had to go to the north. The girl threateningly extended her hand to the girl and asked if she would go with her, but she was afraid of her, and even stepped back. The maid, continuing to persistently extend her hand, repeated her request, but more harshly. Anissa became even more scared. She did not dare to contact her once beloved nanny. She realized that something had changed in her. She, with a frightening look, calmly and friendly, asked the little lady where she was going. But when the girl just wanted to say that she didn't want to, Marilyn fiercely grabbed her hand and loudly ordered her to do what she told her. The little lady was so frightened that she screamed loudly and called Dietrich. The maid grabbed the trembling little girl by the shoulders and said that she shouldn't be afraid, because it was her and not someone else. The girl asked if everything was okay. Looking into the soulless eyes of the maid, the frightened heroine thinks that Maven looks very strange. After all, she can't even focus her gaze. The maid rushed into the girl's arms, but she assumed that her aura must be controlled by someone else because it looked unnatural. The little girl thought that she needed to cleanse it like Lancel. When she tried to do this, she immediately began to succeed. The red color began to dissipate, and Marilyn herself screamed hysterically. The maid reacted unusually. She dug her nails into the child's back. It was very painful for Anissa, but she was glad that everything was working out. The protagonist quickly got out of the prickly embrace and continued to try to dispel the aura, because she almost succeeded in doing so. As a result, she managed to completely clear the maid's energy. She and the girl fell tiredly to the floor, barely catching their breath. Thinking about why her beloved nanny was suffering so much, since it was different with Lancel, Anissa began to tug at Maven, asking her to come to her senses quickly. But she suddenly turned her gaze to the girl. Her eyes no longer looked frightening, but on the contrary, they were filled with bitter tears. The unfortunate subordinate burst into loud sobs, anxiously asking herself what she was going to do, and the little one asked her why she was crying. Trembling all over, the maid began to ask the young lady for forgiveness, but she told her to stop crying, thinking that she had not done anything wrong. But the tears in the worker's eyes did not stop flowing. and she began to talk about how she really did not want this. Then the girl hugged her comfortingly, but suddenly some unknown force threw the maid back so powerfully that she hit her back painfully against the wall. The little lady was very surprised by this unexpectedness. She wanted to rush to Mevin's aid in tears, but then a hand of a certain boy appeared in front of her. It turned out to be Dietrich himself, who, with unfailing calm and composure, told the girl that apparently her life was not at all dear to her. The worker, seeing him, immediately began to apologize, and Anissa, finding herself in her brother's arms, was not satisfied with the fact that he did not appear when she called for help, but came when everything was almost settled. But the main character suddenly thought about it when she heard her nanny confess that she really did serve Lady Leatrix. This woman is the biological mother of Uric Lagrange and Derek's first wife. She is the second best woman in the Lagrange family and has never lost. Without raising her head from the floor, the maid continues to insist that she truly valued Milady. But Dietrich asked if she denied that she had been spying on them all this time. Anissa, however, cannot believe that her beloved nanny turned out to be a spy. Looking at the maid, the heroine now understands why her brother kicked her out of the palace, but judging by the aura, she is sure that the maid actually loves her. Suddenly, the heroine noticed that the protector was going to use his ability. She became scared because she thought that he was going to kill Mevin. The little girl began to pull the Shadow Lord by the hair and scream that it was wrong and he couldn't do that, but he asked in surprise why. The future villain, putting his sister on the floor and preparing to use his power again, sternly asked her not to get underfoot. The protagonist, covering the servant with herself, ordered her friend through tears not to kill Marilyn, but he calmly asked why he couldn't do it. He again asked the little one to move away, but she did not listen to him and continued to stand proudly in her place. But the subordinate herself pushed the child away from herself, asking the young master to punish her, because the princess really does not know anything. The girl again asked her brother not to kill her favorite. The girl desperately asked the boy to believe that she was in Lady Leatrix's power, and Anissa realized that, as she thought, she was being controlled. The subordinate stated that the demon of Lady Veronica, Leatrix's daughter, was to blame for everything, and that she herself would never have done such a thing, because the girl was dear to her. Dietrich objected that this demon was very strong, and she would never have been able to overcome his hypnosis on her own. Mevin said it was possible, but her mind was clouded. But now the veil has lifted. She assumes Veronica has simply lost control of her. The little girl wondered if she should tell him that she had the gift of Heredia, since that would explain that she had cleansed Marilyn's aura herself. But the next moment she doubted, because she thought that as soon as she opened her mouth, Dietrich would kill her, as it happened to her in the book. The lady tells her brother that if he kills the servant, she will hate him. She is offended that she cries out of despair, but hopes that this will help. But he, frowning in bewilderment, asked her again what she wanted to convey to him. The heroine shouted loudly that she would always hate him, and would no longer bring him milk, and would also tell everyone about his demon Baal. After this, the maid fell headfirst on the floor and began to beg the young master to have mercy, since she promised not to report them to Lady Leatrix anymore. The child rushed to the nanny to calm her down, and Dietrich, answering the maid's pleas with a simple and irritated, "Okay," turned around and walked away from them. Marilyn, tearfully hugging the girl, thanked God that everything had worked out. She repented to Anissa, but she, sobbing with her, asked her to stop. The heroine thought that the threat about Baal, as she wanted, worked. The fact is that no one should know about the existence of a demon that is as strong as Gera, the god of the sun, until Dietrich becomes a duke. Evening had come, and the sun's rays fell on the carpeted corridor along which the Lord of Shadows walked. Deep in thought, his memory flashes to his sister, who, with tears welling up in her eyes and raging anger, says that she will hate him. A smile appeared on the boy's face. He mockingly asked himself in his mind whether this girl was serious at that moment. The young mage wondered what was so special about the maid who was watching them. The little girl was so preoccupied with her that she didn't even look at him. As he continues walking, he decides that this is stupid and hopes that his sister doesn't think that he stopped because of her, since he doesn't feel like dealing with her right now. For Dietrich, this little crybaby is just a sacrifice so he can become a duke. He doesn't even consider her a human being, just like his family. The future villain, frowning, once again convinces himself that he stopped not because Anissa stood in his way. Several months have passed since the last events. From the Garden of Withered Roses, the cries of a child are heard, as if he is desperately fighting with someone. It turns out that this is the main character, who is already 3 years old and is training her sword skills, and Baal supports her by clapping his hands. The demon praised the young lady for her excellent sword skills, causing her to smile smugly and think that she had talent. He advised the girl not to reveal herself when she raised the sword, and when the little girl did everything as it should, the evil spirit praised her again. The protagonist thinks that even though she knew Bal was a demon swordsman, she didn't know he would make such a good teacher. She also didn't think she could persuade him with cookies. Gathering all her strength, the young warrior swung at the teacher. She looked powerful, partly because the demon had strengthened her hand with a spell. The girl began to wave her sword near the shadow, but he, without ceasing to smile, pretended that he was in great pain and that his opponent was very scary. The demon fell to the ground, saying with mock disappointment that he seemed to have lost again. But Anissa, catching her breath, said that she hadn't even hit him. Bal continued to mockingly say that this could not be because he was in great pain, but the main character was angry that he was lying to her. The little girl began to stamp her feet in displeasure and tell her teacher that he had not lost, but he said that he was sweating. She angrily ordered him to stop sweating because he looked too dirty, after which the demon immediately apologized. Suddenly, the confused entity spoke up about how he would really like to fight her. But Dietrich told him something. The little one asked Bal what her brother had told him, but he suddenly replied that he had said nothing. This made the heroine very angry. Because the demon refused to tell her the truth, Anissa became completely furious, but he mockingly asked her not to be angry. The sulking girl walked through the garden of withered roses, away from the teacher, wondering what Dietrich had said. But at one point, something interesting caught the little one's attention. A hole in the wall. The lady wondered how long she had been there. The princess wondered where this hole led and wondered if she should ask Bal about it. But the young traveler realized that she didn't need to ask him, her brother, or Marilyn about this, because they wouldn't let her go anyway. The little girl boldly climbed through the hole, thinking that if this wall was in the garden, then there must also be a garden on the other side. But as soon as she found herself on the other side, she was delighted by the luxurious garden she found herself in, and how different it was from the previous one. Anissa likes the golden statue near the fountain, whose eyes are made of diamonds. She also feels a strange aura, but thinks it's because she is surrounded by such luxury. As she approached the monument, she thought about whether she should steal one precious stone, because then her financial situation would improve. But the girl began to think that even if this garden belonged to the Lagranges, she could not have imagined that they had such an elegant garden all this time. Realizing that she had entered Lady Leatrix's garden, the protagonist immediately ran back, thinking that she had gone completely mad. However, she could not leave her arrival unnoticed. Nearby, she heard disgruntled voices calling out to her. Luckily, the main character managed to hide behind the wall, but nearby she hears sounds as if someone is being beaten, but no one screams. She hears the voice of one of the bullies ordering the victim to close her blue eyes before he scratches them out. From the blue eyes, the little girl was able to immediately guess who was on the other side of the wall, and who was unlucky enough to fall into the hands of the robbers. Peeking out from hiding, she noticed Yurik being kicked by other boys, who were shouting at him that he was a disgrace because he couldn't even hit Dietrich. Soon the bullies left, leaving the poor young man alone, and the protagonist, who had been watching them all this time, realized how close they were. The girl looked out more closely to make sure that her guess was correct, and as she had assumed, the victim was Yurik, who was lying helplessly on the ground. The boy, hearing rustling sounds nearby, turned around in fear and asked who was there, when suddenly he saw the young Mrs. Lagrange next to him. Looking at the face of her old acquaintance, Anissa was struck by how much he had grown. Sitting down next to him, she asked her friend if he was in pain, but he didn't answer her, but only looked in amazement at the guest who had suddenly appeared. The girl, thinking that he might have already forgotten about her, introduced herself with a smile, but he asked in surprise if she really was that same child. Yurik asked if she was really Dietrich's younger sister, to which she replied that she was. Then he asked his friend what she was doing there. The young lady thought for a moment, and the young man, perplexed, jumped up from his seat and repeated his question. The little girl said that she was very bored. Pointing cheerfully at the hole in the wall, she says that she simply walked through the hole and ended up here, which further amazes her friend. The young gentleman, taking the heroine by the hand, led her back to the hole, excitedly saying that she should not be there because she would get into trouble. He added that she would be killed if she was spotted in that place. The little one asked in bewilderment why she would be killed. Yurik explains that it's because she's from the Georgina Palace, and Leatrice's children hate everyone from there, especially Alphonse, Dietrich's main enemy. Anissa remembers that outside the game, they are forbidden to kill each other. She wanted to ask something. Thinking that Alphonse is Leatrix's eldest son, He despises Dietrich since they are rivals, but she doesn't know anything about Yurik. Assuming that the blonde must not hate her since she treated him to cookies, the protagonist asked him if he hated her like the other children. The young lady noticed that the boy was embarrassed. She thought that he should be kind, but perhaps he did not like her face. The girl wanted to change the subject of the conversation, so she asked Yurik why those hooligans beat him if he was not a stranger, but he suddenly became frighteningly silent. The little girl already thought that she had said something wrong, but then the young gentleman sadly replied that it was because he had blue eyes. Suddenly, something happens that the boy was not prepared for. The child grabbed him by the tie and pulled him towards himself to look closely into his eyes. The blonde turned away in embarrassment and irritably asked his friend what she was staring at, but she started talking about how he had a very beautiful eye color. Yurik asked again, puzzled, and the little lady replied that his blue eyes looked very beautiful. He again asked what she meant. The main character, leading him by the hand to the fountain, repeated that their beauty was simply off the charts. The girl asked him to look at her eyes through the reflection in the water, hoping that he would be convinced that their color was simply beautiful. The young man looked away from the water surface, saying that it was not so, and only those scum from the south had such eyes. The girl asked what difference it made who else had the same color of iris, but he still insisted. Anissa thought that the friend complex was due to the fact that the Lagrange family hated Southerners, but suddenly she heard a familiar voice calling out to her. It turned out to be Dietrich himself, who had some kind of wound on his cheek. His appearance slightly frightened Yurik, and Anissa was very happy to see him. The girl asked her brother what had happened to his cheek, but he sternly repeated his question. What was she doing in such a place? Turning his attention to the blonde, the Shadow Lord asked if he was the one who brought the young lady here, but he only shuddered in shock at such an accusation. The main character admitted instead that she had come here alone, and when the young magician asked why, she said that she was simply bored. He seemed angered by his sister's words. He asked why she became bored. Dietrich reminded her that he had allowed her to be with Baal, but she thought that he was only her teacher and nanny, although if he had heard this, he would have burst into tears. The young lady decided to change the subject, so she decided to ask her brother again, taking his finger, who hit him, but he coldly said that no one. The protagonist continued to question her protector about who had abused him, because she would take revenge on them, but he remained silent. He asked the girl how she was going to avenge him, to which Anissa said that Belle was teaching her how to handle a sword, and she would try very hard. The Shadow Lord sighed heavily, and the young lady giggled, thinking that this scoundrel was mocking her. Dietrich, taking his sister in his arms, said that it was no longer important, and they should return to their native palace. But Yurik, meanwhile, seemed to have realized something. The blonde thought that, apparently, the rumors were true. He had heard gossip about the heir of the Lagranges having something valuable, namely that he treasured his younger sister, who Camilla had died giving birth to. The boy finds it incredible that any of the Lagranges would care so much about their relatives, and he thinks about reporting everything to his mother. Looking at the girl happily waving goodbye to him, Yurik thinks that if he presses on Dietrich's weakness, his determination will diminish. Suddenly, his aura began to change from red to yellow, and he wondered why Anissa was waving at him like that. The blonde hesitantly clenched his fist, thinking that he wouldn't report this to his mother yet, since he still wasn't completely sure about everything. A few days have passed. Anissa, lying on her bed, thinks about how she has been here for 3 years, but besides the Georgina Palace, she has only seen Leatrice's palace. Jumping out of bed with enthusiasm, she asked the maid if she could see one castle. The maid was at first very surprised by the young lady's request. The heroine was delighted when Marilyn replied that she could visit him, and that she was just about to go there for sugar, and that they could go together. Sometime later, while near the Vaughn Castle, the maid asks the little girl to wait for her on a bench and not go anywhere until she returns. As she left, the girl told her again to wait, as she could easily get lost, as Vaughn Castle was huge, and the lady promised that she would not move from the spot. But as soon as Mevin left the field of vision, the girl immediately got off the bench, wanting to look around a little, because she was much more interested here than at home. But suddenly, her attention was drawn to a loud shout from a man calling someone the offspring of a slave and asking where he was going. The voice continued to shout at someone that he didn't dare look at him like that, and the main character looked out from her hiding place to understand what was going on. There was the unshakable Dietrich, whom a certain man, holding by the collar, scolded for daring to attack Mr. Alphonse. Anissa was very surprised when she saw that the one being bullied was her brother, who was also called a shameless brat. The man shouts at the young man that if he didn't have the power of a demon, then no one would need trash like him. But the boy endures his bullying. The enraged adult threw the child to the ground while the protagonist continued to watch everything. Twirling some keys in his hands, the knight says that usually they are only put on during classes, but he believes that even a couple of hours will not be enough for Dietrich. The man left, ordering the heir of Lagrange to reflect on his behavior. He left the young gentleman alone with a certain chain that bound his hands. Leatrice's subordinate left, and Anissa immediately ran out to her brother, asking if he was wounded, to which he indifferently asked how she ended up there. The heroine said that she came here with her nanny Marilyn. Then suddenly her attention was drawn to the shackles on Dietrich's hands, and he said that it was a seal. The girl became embarrassed because she remembered that this thing was supposed to be used for prisoners who had powerful abilities. The Shadow Lord says that the man said that he could participate in the classes on an equal basis with others only with the seal. But the lady knows that this is a lie, and that this was Alphonse's plan, because he is much weaker. The little girl asked her brother if she was hurting him, to which he said that it wasn't very much. Then the heroine asked where the key to these shackles was, and the boy, picking up his sword, said that the bastard had taken it with him and would free his hands tomorrow. Suddenly, the young lady asked something that left Dietrich momentarily stunned. Why wasn't he looking her in the eye? Anissa asked the heir if he felt ashamed, but he asked her in return. Why would he feel that way? The princess replied that perhaps it was because she had seen him beaten up. The young master said that he had not been beaten up so badly. The girl started talking about how being weak is completely normal, and that guy is big and grown up and he is just a child. But the Shadow Lord said that you can only be weak when you act like a child. Anissa didn't say another word, but simply gently stroked her uncomprehending protector's head. Dietrich asked what she was doing, to which she told him to calm down and promised that she would quickly learn to use the sword to protect him. The little girl claimed that he was still a child and therefore needed protection. But the young master was not satisfied with this, and he wanted to say something to her. But he could not. The young wizard quickly pulled his sister's hand away as she turned to the unexpected sound. The maid she had come here with called out to her. Mevin, unable to hold back her tears, threw herself into the girl's arms. She says that she had already looked everywhere for her and was very worried, for which the girl asked her for forgiveness. However, the girl was reassured by the fact that Anissa had been with Dietrich the whole time. The maid reminded the young gentleman that he also needed to be careful, since children often got lost here at this time of year. The Shadow Lord decided to leave, telling his subordinate that he was not as frivolous as she was, but she apologized and said that she was just worried. Looking at her brother, the main character can't believe that he is a future villain. And where else can you meet a villain who is scolded by a maid? For a long time now, the heir of Lagrange has been studying fencing, and once a week she goes to classes at the castle of Vaughn and returns with a seal. Looking at her tired brother, the protagonist called her Demon Baal. He immediately responded with rattles in his hands, getting ready to play with his mistress. But instead, the girl asked to free Dietrich from the seal, but the demon said that he was powerless here, since divine power was contained within her. Because of this, the girl got upset and called him a useless demon. The entity said that even though he had no heart, her words hurt his feelings. Dietrich suddenly woke up, but his tired appearance left much to be desired. He asked his sister not to take it out on Bala. Anissa asked him how to free him, to which he replied that he needed a key. The girl said that if she met that uncle, she would deal with him. The young mage smiled and said that if she met him, she should hide, since he was one of Derek's favorite knights and Leatrix's younger brother. Anissa was very angry. She knew that someone was covering for this man and he would get away with it. And although Dietrich was despised, he was still one of the Duke's heirs. Looking at the boy's hands, she realizes that because of the seal, he will not be able to control the shadow, and therefore he will not be able to cope with the killers who attack every night. The future villain sighed tiredly, which made the little girl realize that he was completely exhausted and that she needed to do something. She, thinking about Leatrice's younger brother, Leon Euler, thought that if she remembered something from the original novel, she would definitely come up with something. The girl remembered that Marcus Euler, Leon's father, does not get along well with Derek. She decides to take advantage of the latter since Dietrich is now very weak. Baal, noticing the princess's thoughtful giggling, joked that she looked like a witch. But she also joked, asking what the useless demon had said. The entity said that she was very rude, and the protagonist was determined that she needed at least a chance to destroy Leon. A few days later, Anissa, sitting on the sofa and drawing, noticed Lancel, who brought her a tray of food. The subordinate was not happy with the fact that she was looking for her again, but he himself had taken care of the little lady since her childhood. The man continued to mumble something discontentedly, and the young lady repeated her question, and the servant said that someone had called her nanny, and the little girl asked who. The main character became wary when she heard from the food delivery man that Marilyn had been taken by Leon Euler. Lancel added that the man was a knight, but he didn't think the little lady had heard anything about him. Suddenly, Anissa, stamping her foot menacingly, told her subordinate to take her to this uncle, but he indifferently asked if she wanted to see her favorite nanny. The girl, decisively hitting the chair with her fist, declared that this was her order. Carrying the baby in his arms, he says that she is a lot of trouble and has become even more disgusting since their last meeting. But the lady asks him to keep quiet. Soon the couple came to the garden, where the protagonist heard her favorite nanny persistently asking someone to leave her alone. The knight asked the girl how long she would reject him, because since she was good enough for him, she did not need to wind herself up. Lancel asked what they should do now that he had brought her here, but she asked him to be quiet. Leon, meanwhile, asked Mary if she was free. The uncle reminded his beloved that she was almost 30 and was no longer so young for marriage, but the maid strictly asked him not to put her in a difficult position. The knight called her choice very stupid, then said that she had no place in that hovel called the Lagrange Palace, so he suggested that she come to them. Anissa listens to the man's words about how the upstart Dietrich will never become a duke, because, unlike their Alphonse, no one supports him. Leon furiously declared that the successor to the Lagranges would be the one chosen by the Euler family, and that the ruler of the North's time was up, since women had driven him crazy. Marilyn asked him to be more careful with his expressions, to which he replied that it was most likely true, because Derek was in love with Leatrice. The man adds that he was the one who gave him this key. Leon says that this key is not only for the seal itself, it can be used to open the basement where the sealing stone is located. Uncle explained what he was getting at. The fate of the entire family depended on the Eulers. The knight advises the girl to join them quickly, and if she agrees while she is still young, he promises that he will not have more than 2 mistresses. Lancel shut the main character's mouth because she was about to start swearing at what this idiot was saying. The frivolous man began to walk away from the maid, asking her to think carefully about it. The impudent fellow also told the maid that he had no intention of kissing her, but the little lady suddenly noticed something that surprised her greatly. Lancel, emerging from his hiding place, rushed to Mevin and asked how she was. But the protagonist, watching Leon leave, thinks something is wrong with his aura. The girl realized that this aura meant that he was in anticipation of something. Anissa, embittered that this guy dared to touch Marilyn and Dietrich, realized that now was her chance to follow him and find out everything. Leon, having reached a large stone wall around which there were only tall trees, looked around warily. When he was sure that no one was watching him, he pulled out several bricks from the wall to create a hole. Anissa watches as he tells a friend on the other side of the fence that he's clear, and then asks if he brought the money, to which he reminds him of the sealing stone. Members of the Lagrange family are born with the ability to control demons, but if they fail, they can do so with the help of this stone. The heroine knows that for the Lagranges, the shadow demon is the source of their strength and a symbol of their power, but she guesses that this cunning man is going to sell the stone. Sipping the valuable artifact through the hole, the knight asks the buyer if he is sure, to which the buyer asks if he has had time to doubt their deal. The recipient of the jewel said that he would go to the bank right away, and Leon, greedily examining his money, laughed and declared that he would take his word for it. Having received his benefit, the trader immediately went about his business as if nothing had happened, not even noticing that the girl had been following him the whole time. Anissa, clenching her fist resolutely, was glad that she had managed to catch this scoundrel red-handed. The Lagrange family is one of the most cruel, heartless, and notorious, but on the short winter night they hold banquets to drive away the cold. Dietrich changed into a beautiful, warm outfit, in which he will soon attend a banquet. But then a little lady came up to him and asked him to take her with him. He coldly asked why he should do that. The girl said she wanted to try the winter pudding, thinking that if she told the truth about wanting to go there to blame Leon, he would not take her. The boy said that nothing good would come from her presence there, and when she asked why, he replied that something might happen if Derek found out about her. The young man decided not to say anything more, and Anissa hinted that she even dressed smartly and nicely, but the young magician declared that there was nothing beautiful about her. The little one immediately pouted and mentally called her brother a real bastard, because Marilyn, on the contrary, said that she looked like a fairy. Still, casting a cold glance at his sister, he allowed her to go with him to the celebration. The lady was so delighted that she jumped up. She expected that he would give in if she only pressed him, but Dietrich reminded her to behave decently. Finding herself at a banquet attended by rich ladies and gentlemen, The little lady was surprised to find that the castle was even larger than she had expected. While all the elite guests were sitting down at the table, the head duke of the Lagrange family greeted Anissa, saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The girl also greeted him modestly, and Dietrich, sitting down on a chair, told the gentleman that she was his sister. Derek asked him if she was Camilla's daughter. The man told the girl that she didn't seem to be afraid of him at all, and the little girl laughed. But in her mind, she assumed that he had probably already forgotten about her. But then her attention was drawn to a certain guest who was sitting nearby. He told the young lady that they seemed to have met somewhere before. It was a grandfather with a long beard. He was surprised out loud that there was an heiress in the palace, although the Lagranges rarely had girls. Then the grandfather was struck by the fact that now his head did not hurt in such a place as usual, and the woman next to him agreed with this. The heroine realized that she had managed to clear this place. She was glad that she had managed to clear the place of such a stifling aura, which was so murky that it seemed as if the guests were enveloped in a thick fog. But the girl still remembered why she decided to attend this banquet, in order to sort things out with Leon, who was sitting right across from her. The young lady is angry that this scoundrel is devouring Mevin with his gaze again, although he himself looks like he is twice her age. The child clenched his fists in anger, wondering why this bastard wouldn't leave Mevin alone, even though she had already refused him. The protagonist decided it was time to act. Anissa knows that Derek loves it when people tremble in fear in front of him, and if she pretends that Leon scares her more, then she will interest him. Suddenly, in the middle of a quiet feast, young Mrs. Lagrange abruptly pushes her chair back, causing everyone present to turn their heads towards her. The actress without an Oscar, looking at the knight in fear, began to shake all over. Mr. Derek calmly asked the little girl what had happened. She was secretly pleased that, as she had expected, she had attracted his attention. The gentleman realized that the girl was looking fearfully at Leon, so he asked why she was staring at him like that. The knight also began to sweat when the ruler of the clan spoke coldly about him. Menacingly placing a glass of wine on the table, Derek asked the unfortunate woman why she was afraid of this uncle if they were both family members. But Anissa said in a trembling voice that this guy once said that he was much scarier than the main duke. It is noticeable that the man was hurt by the child's words about someone else being scarier than him. The little girl asked the maid if this was true, since Leon had recently threatened her in the garden. But the girl asked, embarrassed, how she knew this. Mevin said it was true, and added that the man had said that the fate of the entire family depended solely on the Oilers. Leon jumped up indignantly and told His Highness that it was not so. But the traitor's heart finally sank into his heels when the young lady confessed that she saw him exchange the red stone with someone for money. The head of the clan asked the knight not to tell him that it was their precious sealing stone, but he excitedly declared that Anissa was lying. The important woman who was sitting between Derek and Leon ordered the latter to get out immediately, but he asked her again in bewilderment. This lady turned out to be Leatrice. She reminded the traitor that he was at a multi-hour night banquet, and there was no need to make a scene. She told His Highness that if her brother was truly guilty, she asked that he be dealt with properly immediately after the celebration, to which he agreed. Soon the winter celebration in the castle continued, and the ruler of the family asked the culprit to give him the key and leave. After the banquet, the young magician and the main character arrived home and were already getting ready for bed. But the girl was outraged by the fact that her brother said that she would sleep alone today. The little girl called out to him, but he did not respond, and then she asked him if he was angry with her. The boy said that she had promised to behave decently, but she had said that Leon had been bad and had offended him and Marilyn, so she had answered him. The young gentleman said he didn't need any help, then asked why she was so worried about that maid, to which the girl replied that she was good. The Shadow Lord irritably stated that there were no good people in this castle, and there was no need to sympathize with anyone because it would lead to nothing. The sister, following her brother, objected that there was nothing wrong with sympathy, but he said it was shameful, to which the little lady again denied. The young master sat quietly by the fireplace, and Anissa told him that if he needed help, he should just accept it, because after all, he was a child. After this, the little girl added that her maid was definitely a good person, but the boy asked why she was so sure of this. She, knowing that she wasn't allowed to say that she could read auras, laughed modestly and said that she simply knew it. As he walked towards the bed, Dietrich told his sister that a naive girl like her could easily be deceived. But when she asked when she had ever been deceived, he asked her to forget what he had said. When the young man asked her to go with him, the girl happily asked if they still slept together, to which he replied that they did. The heroine happily lay down with her protector in bed, hugging him. She is happy that at least today she will not fall asleep shivering from the cold. Since winter has not yet passed and the palace they live in is not heated in any way, the children have to look for different ways to keep warm. But when Anissa sleeps with her protector, she doesn't feel so cold at night, and she also feels much calmer next to him. The main character, while the maid was fixing her hair, promised her that she would become her protector and would protect her from all villains. However, the girl herself thinks that she would rather die as a wanderer than as a protector of Mevin, and this is only possible if she hones her sword skills with Bal. But the girl replied that lovely ladies should never protect others, but on the contrary, it is she who should protect her. The little girl objected that she was so weak, but suddenly a man approached the ladies and told the princess that she really was not like the other Lagrange children. The little one turned her head in surprise towards the sound, amazed that a stranger had suddenly appeared in the garden of dead roses. Looking around, she saw the same grandfather she had seen at the banquet table. She called out to Mr. Joseph in confusion. The young heiress bowed to the unexpected guest and greeted him, and when her grandfather asked if she knew who he was, she replied that she did not. He said his name was Joseph Louis Euclid, but she could just call him Joseph. The little girl was surprised that Euclid was among the Lagranges. The girl asked if he was really Euclid, to which the grandfather said that yes, but he became a traitor, but his younger brother was the head of the house of this family. But Joseph admitted that he killed the brat and joined the Lagranges. Anissa wondered if that meant he was bad and her great-grandfather. The old man said that he saw that the protagonist had red eyes. He asked the child if she had had them since birth. The maid replied that they were, and that they sparkled like two large rubies. He said that he had apparently not been able to see them at the banquet because of the lighting. Grandfather says that he was wondering if she was the keeper of the north from the tales. The heroine, hearing about the keeper, realized that she had heard it somewhere before. Joseph says that the Lagranges worship demons, and the Euclids worship the sun god. But there are also supporters of Eris, the prophets. The young lady with burning eyes listens to a tale from him, which says that a child with azure eyes will be the savior of the north. The protagonist understood who they were talking about. Saint Charlotte, the heroine who will save Dietrich. But the little girl does not understand why her grandfather is looking for her among the Lagranges. The exile started talking about Camilla failing, and there were rumors that the child had died, so it was impossible. The heiress doesn't understand why he started talking about Camilla, but apparently he knows the truth. The girl told her grandfather that he was saying some strange things, but he laughed and apologized to her for being annoying. Handing the little girl a candy, he asked her if she liked stories, then added that he felt that his mind was becoming clearer when he was with her. The child took the candy from him, and the grandfather also admitted that he felt as calm as in the Temple of Eris. The protagonist smiled sweetly at him and thanked him for the treat. But in her mind, she realized that she needed to be much more careful with her ability. He also smiled and expressed his hope that they would see each other often, and the girl thinks that if someone finds out her secret, it will be revealed. After some time, knocking on Joseph's house, the main character thinks that she should still be careful, but she also cannot miss the opportunity to learn more. Dr. N asked her if she had come to hear stories about Eris again, to which she replied that she had. As he escorted his listener into the house, he said that she seemed to enjoy hearing stories about her, to which she replied that Eris was cool, although she wasn't. The exile says that, as he mentioned earlier, this girl could influence people's feelings, and although she could not make someone fall in love with her, she could make someone give her preference. The grandfather added that this person was as interesting to him as he was to her, but Anissa asked why he was here then, since he said that the North did not worship Eris. He replied that he was simply studying demons. He confessed that he was trying to recreate a demon using the powers of the sacred tree. The girl was interested in his words, and Joseph said that although Eris was weaker than the sun god, even as a human, she fought demons. Descending somewhere along the stairs, he asked the little girl if she wanted to look at the sacred tree, which does not grow here because the lands are filled with shadows. She followed him, mentally surprised at how quickly this storyteller changed the subject, even though she was genuinely interested. Handing the plant to the child, the old man said that this was the sacred tree that fights with curses. The girl thought that it was probably useful. The young lady looked at the sprout with admiration, thinking that it would be nice to take it for herself. At this point, Joseph started talking about her being able to take this tree for herself, and he had 2 more in his scent. She thanked him for his generosity. While the princess was looking at her gift, her grandfather said that the tree would not grow, but she would feel better if it was near her. But then the storyteller said something that really surprised the main character. The sacred plant would not be friends with her brother. He explained that Dietrich's demon was Baal, the only demon that Eris's power did not affect, so they were incompatible. The protagonist understood why the boy's aura was impossible to read. As Anissa walks home that evening, she reflects on how she thought her brother was emotionless. But after being with him longer, she was able to see his better side. The lady admits that he has very cute features, and she doesn't think that he will become a villain when he grows up. But then the poor girl, not suspecting anything, heard someone wheezing, after which she saw a terrifying picture. She saw in the middle of the clearing a multitude of human bodies, which were smeared with blood, and under which there was also blood. Dietrich stood quietly among them. Hearing a strange sound behind him, the boy turned around. His gaze depicted nothing more than callousness, cold-bloodedness, and cruelty. But the next moment, his entire terrifying image seemed to have been blown away by the wind. He became the same as before, when he was surprised to see his sister. The little girl looked at the Shadow Lord in shock and fell to the ground, unable to utter even 2 words. Walking towards the girl through the corpses and their blood, the young gentleman asked her what she was doing here at such a time. She wanted to answer something, but she couldn't, because she was overcome by the fear that the heir, in a fit of anger, would do something terrible to her. But fortunately, nothing like that happened, and Dietrich only took her in his arms and asked if she had gone to that old man again. On the way to the palace, the young man said that the garden was dangerous at night, but she said that the sun had not set yet. The young magician suggested that the girl take her to her grandfather next time, to which she agreed. The heroine thought that there was nothing wrong with being a villain in a world where everyone wanted to kill you. The main thing for her was that he was kind to her. Thus, 5 years of her life with her brother in the palace had already flown by. The protagonist, hearing that someone had entered the room, turned around to look, but there a terrible sight awaited her. Dietrich, sighing heavily and holding one hand, came into the room completely covered in blood, with which he even smeared the door. When the little girl asked him in fear what had happened, he, walking around the room as if nothing had happened, asked her to leave him alone. The young lady was overcome with fear and hopelessness. She did not know what to do, although her friend was very badly wounded. Looking at the wounded heir, tears welled up in her eyes at the mere thought that he might die. The girl began to think about what she should do. Suddenly, the heroine runs out of the room, screaming that she will go and find Marilyn. The little girl knows that she has many friends in Vaughn Castle, and she will definitely help. She ran as fast as she could, wondering if she should call Joseph and who the hell hit her brother so hard. But suddenly, a sudden guess stunned her. A cut appeared on Dietrich's left eye, which meant that Derek was already going to kill him. But then the girl stopped running because she suddenly crashed into something that scared her very much. She was led astray by the head of the Lagrange family himself. He leaned menacingly towards the child and asked where his son was now. The protagonist fell to the floor in fear. She can't figure out what Derek is doing here. Just by looking at the man's frightening red aura, the young lady was shocked by the guess that he was going to kill her protector. Without waiting for an answer from the child, the master ignored the girl and walked on to look into the room of the Lord of Shadows. Thanks to the original book, Anissa remembers that this is the very moment when he became obsessed with Leatrice and started helping Alphonse. In the novel, Dietrich survived, but he is now in too bad of a condition, and the young lady is worried that this might affect the plot. As she watches Derek walk away, she wonders if everything will be okay, and if her brother will survive if she leaves things as they are. But the next moment, she resolutely and abruptly rose to her feet, deciding that now she had to get there by any means necessary before the formidable ruler of the clan. As soon as Anissa shouted out Baal's name, he immediately appeared next to her, ready to listen to the order from his princess. The child ordered the demon to send her to her brother and quickly, and he, ready to just snap his finger, said that her wish would be fulfilled. The very next second, the young lady jumped out of the portal straight onto the sofa where the exhausted Lord of Shadows sat. Without wasting any time, the space traveler told Dietrich that he urgently needed to escape, but he calmly asked why. She repeated loudly that he needed to save himself, because the Duke was already on his way here. The boy frowned in displeasure when his sister spoke about his father. The young master immediately called his demon, and it was there in an instant. The heir asked the entity if he could handle it. He replied to the ruler that in his current state this was hardly possible. The girl, resentfully kicking the demon, hysterically ordered him to start defending her brother, but he only looked at her in bewilderment. Baal asked if they could use the princess as a go-between, but Dietrich said no. Then the demon said that they seemed to have no choice. Then the young master ordered him to bring here any other candidate, justifying this by the fact that his father would not kill him in the presence of others. The evil spirits immediately carried out the master's order, after which an unsuspecting Yurik, who had been calmly eating a croissant before, fell into the room from the portal. The blonde screamed in confusion and asked what the hell was going on. The girl waved and said hello, but Baal took her away, as the Duke was already approaching. The demon and his princess disappeared. Dietrich stood up from the sofa and bowed to the one standing in front of him, and the sudden guest froze in amazement. Mr. Derek appeared in the room, surrounded by a terrifying blood-red aura. The man menacingly asked Yurik what he was doing there, and the main character, secretly watching what was happening, was surprised that even in the presence of another child, his thirst for blood did not diminish. Having not received an answer from the frightened boy, the head of the clan said that he didn't care, because he was a complete disappointment, for which he quietly apologized. Then he turned his attention to Dietrich and was horrified to see his appearance. The gentleman asked his son if he was wounded, to which he replied that he was. Derek reminded the boy that he was one of the best candidates and that he should take care of himself, which made Anissa very angry, because she knows that he beat him up himself. But then what the girl is so afraid of happens. Her father says that he needs to talk to Derek right now, so he orders Yurik to leave the room. Fearing the loss of hope that everything would be okay with her brother, the protagonist suddenly stuck her hand out from the balcony where she had been hiding all this time. The little girl decided to take advantage of her plan and, running out of the balcony, loudly asked the blonde not to leave but to play with her. He became very embarrassed and asked her what had happened to her. But she, continuing to pretend to be a capricious child, repeated that she wanted to play with him. The girl's screams, where she asked her friend not to leave and the boy's pleas to let him go, caused an ambiguous reaction in Derek, which looked scary. Suddenly, he grabbed Anissa by the clothes and brought her closer to himself, saying that this child did not look a bit like Camilla. The man added that her pretty face could be sold profitably into slavery to compensate for the harm caused by her mother. He called it a shame that Camilla did not bear him as many children as he wanted. Then the head of the clan suggested that if he sold the heroine now, while she was still young, he would get even more. The girl thought, what a bastard he was. But then Dietrich objected that this little one had abilities, but she was still too small to use them properly. The father smiled and said that in that case he could get even more money for her, because rads with abilities are quite expensive. He cited Dietrich's mother as an example of such a slave, but he did not react to the Duke's boorish behavior in any way, not even raising an eyebrow. But suddenly, a barely noticeable thin smile appeared on the boy's face, which interested Derek and probably confused him. The young man calmly asked his father if he wanted to disgrace the Lagrange family. The latter, not expecting such a question from him, asked again. The boy explains that his sister may not be a candidate, but she is still part of the family and is not useless, so selling her would damage the family's reputation. The Duke, after thinking for a moment, nevertheless let go of Anissa so that she fell painfully to the floor, saying that there was no arguing with that. He ordered the child with abilities to tell him her name, and she, trembling all over with fear, introduced herself. Smiling menacingly, the man said that it looked like it was time for her to go to bed. He didn't say anything else, but simply left the room, finally leaving the children alone. The main character immediately threw herself into her brother's arms, which surprised him a little. It was still unexpected for the boy, but he hugged his sister and stroked her head, saying that everything was fine now. The Shadow Lord suddenly wondered if he had already gotten used to taking care of this lady, and such things had already become a habit for him. The young man was so deep in thought that he didn't even notice that his sister had called out to him several times. Finally, he asked her what she wanted. His hand shook when he saw the tears in Anissa's eyes as she asked him if he was okay. What he saw made the young man feel so strange that he didn't even know what to think. It was at this moment that Dietrich felt something, and it was like a premonition, but not a good one. But a bad one. The child, who had no connection with him and was not anyone special to him, and who was supposed to become his victim, suddenly became important to him. Sometime later, Yurik, walking in the garden, suddenly heard someone calling him and pronouncing his name incorrectly, Yuri. It turned out to be the main character, who, looking out of a hole in the wall, smiled and waved at him. The boy sheepishly said that she could not stay in his garden all the time, so he asked her to wait. He immediately and deftly jumped over the fence, although the girl thought that this wall was still quite high. The protagonist noticed that this young man was confident in himself, but he was still a candidate for succession. Once he was there, the blonde said that his name was not Yuri, but Yurik, but she called him wrong again. Then he sighed and asked why she came. The little girl asked where he was going, but he asked why she was asking about it. Anissa said that he was a candidate and couldn't see Baal, so she asked if he had a fight with Dietrich. He said he didn't know. The blonde added that they had different priorities and that this guy set his own rules. The princess asked him discontentedly why he was so weak. The boy did not deny the main character's words, which made him a little upset. The little one suddenly started talking about how he had very beautiful eyes, but the young heir, blushing like a tomato, said that this was not so. The young lady continued to insist that they were very beautiful, but suddenly she felt someone's presence nearby. Dietrich appeared next to her, covered in some kind of dust. The girl asked him where he had been, but he pushed his sister away from the blonde, saying that he had already asked her not to play with that guy. Yurik indignantly asked the Shadow Lord if it was he who grabbed him by the ankle and forced him to summon him. But the young magician, without saying a word, began to shake off the dust from himself to spite the boy. This made him very angry, and he asked if he had summoned anyone in front of his father. Unexpectedly, Dietrich said that maybe yes. This strange answer puzzled the blonde, and he asked him again. The future villain smiled and spoke about what would happen if he said yes. He reminded his friend that if he wanted to scream, no one would hear him. Anissa, thinking that she was about to cry because her brother looked like a villain at such moments, asked him where he had been. Looking at the heir, the girl thought that despite the fact that he was a villain, his aura was a vaguely gray color, and she could not understand what he was thinking. The young man replied that he heard that she was looking for him, to which she looked at him in bewilderment. The young gentleman, pulling the girl's hand away from himself, asked her not to look for him anymore, since she was not yet old enough to do this alone. The Shadow Lord left, and Anissa and Yurik were left looking after him in bewilderment. The latter suddenly noticed that the young lady had tears in her eyes and seemed to be holding back, so he asked her if everything was okay. Loudly indignant, the heroine asked if it meant that she was not old enough if she was already 5 years old. But the blonde man embarrassedly replied that, in fact, that was true. But the little girl called him evil and ungrateful. Several days had passed since that incident, but Dietrich had not appeared in the palace for a long time. Anissa asked Baal about him, but he insisted that he did not know. The demon repeated to the princess that he really didn't know, but she said he was lying, because he was her brother's lackey. The entity said he wasn't a lackey. As she walked outside, the lady thought that the protector would be angry if he knew about this, and that development might be slow because she did not have enough knowledge. The little girl, crawling through a hole in the wall, saw someone's male legs and already thought that it was Yurik, which is why she joyfully called him. But she was mistaken, and it turned out to be a guy she didn't know at all, who roughly grabbed her by the arm and lifted her up so that the unfortunate woman screamed in pain. The rude man asked the girl why she was screaming like that, then said that it was strange because she was, in fact, just a child. Having thrown the young lady to the ground, the guy was surprised to recognize the unexpected guest as Dietrich's younger sister. Only when the offender grabbed her cheeks, Anissa saw his face and realized that it was Alphonse. The heir told her that she was beautiful, but untalented. The impudent man started talking about how friendship with her was worthless, because in friendship one is always the slave of the other. But the girl asked him to let her go, because she came here to meet Yurik, and not him. Not intending to let the poor thing go, Alphonse asked her why she wanted to meet his competitor. The young lady fell silent, and then the guy, pushing her hard to the side, ordered her to answer. Even then, the main character did not speak, which angered the heir of Euclid even more. He asked if she was going to answer him at all,